I'm not. Do I just? How do I do this?
We're live now. Hey,
we're live now. Oh God, I hope we can edit this up.
You don't edit live.
This is
live. Pat Fitzbgibbons. Welcome to the Instructor Roundtable. I've been asked to kind of sub for our fearless leader, Adam Kinakin, and with me we have Jim Dudley, Clifford, and Jason Piccolo. Welcome all. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And this was so cool with Adam, getting us all together. And I think some other people were supposed to, I know Jay Dobbins was supposed to be, I don't think he's going to be able to make it, right? I think he had some other obligations, but hopefully maybe he could pop in. Yeah. But this is such a good thing that Adam put together. Great idea, because we can all collaborate and we can talk about podcasting and law enforcement, with each of us are doing for the profession. We're all doing pretty much the same thing, but we all have different, platforms and stuff like that. So it'd be great. Let's talk about it. Jim, why don't we start with you, my friend, and Jim Dudley with Policing Matters. And he's been doing this for a long time, and talk about who you are and what you're doing for the great profession.
Well, thanks, Pat. Yeah, I'm Jim Dudley. I'm just south of San Francisco, California, and it's only 4:15 here. You guys are well into the evening. I did 32 years with San Francisco PD. I served in all the ranks from patrol officer through the mid-management levels to commander. Our appointed positions are commander, deputy chief, and chief. And by chiefs, I was appointed to commander and deputy chief of patrol and investigations when I left. And I went right into teaching. I teach at San Francisco State University, 4 classes in criminal justice. I do some off-road consulting, and I do the podcast, Policing Matters, for Police One, and I write for them under the article byline, Under Oath. And I have a great editor, Nancy Perry. She's just the best. And between the two of us, we come up with our guest lists, our topics, and she really gives me a lot of freedom, and I really enjoy it. I'm in my 4th year now. I started out with Doug Wiley, my old P1 partner, and he's writing for some other publications, and I'm still in touch with him. He's in the Great White North of the Great Northwest. So shout out to Doug Wiley.
Yeah, and it's a great podcast. I mean, I've listened to it many times. And what do you discuss a lot on the show, Jim? I mean, what kind of topics do you hit?
Well, it started out, Doug asked me to collaborate on some articles early on. And then he said, hey, Police One wants me to start up a podcast. And I thought of you. You want to do it? So we did kind of a Q&A like we all do now with guests.
Yeah.
Doug did that with me. And so we would come up with some topics, do some research, try to be not so, echo chamber about the topics that there was some diversity, and we didn't get to animosity, but we discussed things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was fun. And now it's me. Since COVID hit in March, I've picked up the mantle, and I'm doing one-on-one interviews with anybody and anything that has to do with law enforcement, from technology to health and well-being, mental health, police suicides, statistics, the educational side of the house. Just had a great interview that's posted this week. Janae Gasparini, educator. She's awesome. If you get a chance, listen to her. Henner Gracie last week. Henner Gracie, the jiu-jitsu family Gracies. Amazing. I think he's onto something. And I think, I hope in 2021, I've talked to somebody from California Post, and they're talking about picking it up. So I think that's awesome. And I mean, all of you, I've listened to your programs, and Pat, we've gone back a couple of years now, and I've listened to your shows, and I think we tend to feed off each other, and we have similar guests. Some it's just a matter of reaching out, and they agree to be on the show. I like sending them a mock script where they get an idea that it's not going to be adversarial, that it's going to be, informational, right? They could be persuasive if they want to be, but for me, it's just asking these open-ended questions, and I love it when they riff. I just love it when they go off. But there's some before the live broadcast, we all talked about how easy or difficult it is to get a guest. And there's been a couple I've been on after, and I try to join them up on LinkedIn and then sneak in the invitation. And I hope to learn from you guys how to get it, how to get the guest. And I want to quote an Autumn Clifford quote that I heard last week. And I'm going to be around. I'm going to be on the podcast on this group for a while, because she says, quote, "If you are the smartest in the room, get the F out."
So, I agree with that.
Don't worry about me leaving.
I agree with that, Jim. And that's the beautiful thing about, the age we're living in, I think, is that there's very few gatekeepers anymore, meaning you can, with social media, I mean, it really is cool where I can reach out to Jim Dudley and say, "Hey, buddy, I would love to have you on my show. Love what you're doing." That's the great, I mean, I think we just live in such a great time amid all of the problems we have as far as technology and getting people on the show and starting that collaboration and networking. It's just an amazing time.
Yeah,
it really is.
For sure.
So let's go to the beautiful Autumn Clifford from Changing the Culture podcast, another huge podcast. And I've been listening to her for a long time, and she's a good friend of mine. Autumn, tell the listeners and viewers who you are.
Thanks, Pat. First off, I have a good show, but it's because Pat came in and taught me a lot.
Wasn't me.
You absolutely did. Right in the beginning, he saw I was like this little girl probably struggling, and he was like, "Hey, come on, let me just show you how to do this." So much appreciation to you, Pat. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Autumn Clifford. I'm a police officer from Maine. I've been a police officer since I've been 20 years old. I was injured in the line of duty when I was 27. It was a career-ending injury. I hurt my back, but I'm still working in a part-time capacity, which is really cool. As a chief that felt bad for me, and he picked me up, and I work in this little podunk police department doing community stuff. So I'm in no way doing patrol, which I just like to make very clear. It is sad, but at least I get to keep my gun and my badge.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. I am also an adjunct professor, and I teach criminal justice. And that's been really fun to do that. And I'm also, so my big thing, I have my Changing the Culture podcast, but I'm a life coach for first responders, which has been really fun because it is completely brand new, completely different than what anybody else is doing. I've been helping a lot of officers and their families survive the job on duty and off. Emotional, mental survival is key right now, especially with everything that we're going through. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to doing, and I love it. And that's what brought me here with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for being here, Autumn. And it is so important. We all talk about, resiliency and developing that proper mindset, especially in these difficult times. I mean, we all talk about it. I mean, it's such a tough time. I never thought, I knew law enforcement has been through turbulent times and stuff like that, but I never thought I would see it in my lifetime where, law enforcement, it's always been a difficult job. You all know that, but it is so, I still think a majority of people support law enforcement, the vast majority. I just wish people were more vocal with their support with law enforcement. It's almost like and I know we all talk about it on our different shows, but it's almost like sometimes people are kind of afraid to voice their, support for law enforcement because they're afraid to be judged. And that's the one thing I really love about your show, Autumn, is you teach people and you coach people about how to develop that resiliency and mindset to go out there and be the best they can personally and professionally. So thanks for being here. And which leads me to my good friend, Jason Piccolo from the Protectors podcast, another amazing show. I've been on his, he's been on mine. Welcome, brother. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, man. I enjoy being on here. And yeah, we're going to talk about later on how we get our guests and get Sharon and all that stuff. But we definitely need it. We definitely need more guests out there. My show doesn't just necessarily focus directly on law enforcement, while I do love having LEOs on. But we hit the whole spectrum: military, veterans, law enforcement. But yeah, and the reason I like the law enforcement is I've been in the feds for almost 21 years now. Everything from, I started off as a border patrol agent, now I was a special agent with DHS and Customs and DOD and everywhere for the past 20 years. And yeah, man, I love it. And then I also was in the military. That's why I like doing you'll kind of see, I like talking about things I like to talk about, because if you're going to be in a podcast world, it's nice to kind of ping on those things. So yeah, I was a U.S. Army captain. I was an enlisted dude as an artillery guy, infantry officer, Did a tour in Iraq back in '06, so it's been a while. I am also an adjunct professor, which I absolutely love talking about that. And yeah, man, I've been teaching Homeland Security, criminal justice, white collar crime, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And immigration law. Throw a little immigration law in there too. So, and podcasting. Podcasting is my passion. I absolutely love it. I love doing video formats like this now. I think when you and I first started out, we were talking audio, and now we're all jumping on the video bandwagon, and I love video. And I love roundtables like this, so let's get to it, Pat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And again, thank you for being here, brother. Check out his show, The Protectors. Great show. They're all great shows. And I'm Pat Fitzgibbons, and I have a podcast, CJ Evolution. I started about a little over 4 years ago. And I remember I listened to podcasts for a long time now. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to try to do that. I mean, I wonder if it's going to be that hard to do that. So I just grew my show, and I'm still learning about, the do's and don'ts about podcasting. I learned from each and every one of you. But I spent 23 years in law enforcement, started out on patrol, worked my way up, and retired as an operations commander in 2019. And I just had a great ride in law enforcement. There were ups and downs, just like any profession. But I love having Leos on my show, like you indicated, everybody indicated on here, Leos and military. I also like going a little bit on a different path, and I have like people that talk about fitness and nutrition and finance and entrepreneurs, because that's all applicable to law enforcement. It's my show is criminal justice based. The premise is criminal justice, but I like to have a mixture of people on the show and weave it back into the professions, for example, like finance experts. I mean, who's not interested in finance? It affects us all. So I have a great time with my show. I'm very passionate about it, as are each of you. And I'm just having a great time. I'm not really retired. People say, well, what are you doing in retirement? I'm like, I think I'm busier than ever. I think I'm more busy now than when I was on the job. I mean, with shows and things like that, but it's a good busy, and I had a great career, and I'm just blessed. And again, thank you all for being here. So let's get into it. I mean, I don't know who wants to field the first question, but we talk about this a lot on our shows, but what do you think, again, for the viewer and the listener, what do you think some of the things first responders, brave men and women on the front line are struggling with today? I mean, what do you think? Jason, I know I said, let's kick it to you, buddy. What do you think? Well, you talk to a lot of people.
The media is a great thing sometimes, but the media can also be damaging to the soul. When you're getting 99% of everything going on out there right now being, abolish police, defund police, it's tough, and you don't have that support. And now we're seeing, you and I and everybody else on this panel, everybody watching, everybody's going to watch, knows that the defund police thing is taking away other resources, taking away the specialized units, taking away all those units maybe that are trying to help out with the emotional needs of the LEOs out there. We don't have anybody that's going to say, hey, you know what, you're having a bad day. Why don't you go see such and such? Go see your critical incident response person or whatever. Or anybody that deals with stress, man. There's no support package out there right now for LEOs. None.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of people, and I could count on one hand. I know each and every one of you talk to a lot of Leos. I can count on one hand people that I know that are staying in the field. The rest are looking for an exit ramp, which is sad, because it's, people aren't flocking to law enforcement like they did when I started over 2 decades ago. Yeah. It is very, very hard to get and retain good people. So Jim, I'm going to ask you the question. I mean, you spent a lot of time in law enforcement at senior levels. How does command staff and people at those levels, how do they come up with strategies to kind of recruit and retain the best and brightest?
Well, that's a great question. And it just so happens I'm working with a software group that's looking to use COVID and Zoom as a recruiting tool. So I think we're going to see a lot of off-site interviews. We're going to have across the nation recruiting. You're not going to be restricted to your immediate region as has been in the past. And this group that I'm working with, they're going to actually take cadres of students, criminal justice students, and put them on a path where any law enforcement agency can subscribe and essentially have an audience there to solicit and show the best parts of their agencies. And I think we're going to bounce back. I mean, of course, we can only go up, right? So I think right now, after about 2 or 3 months of defunding mentality, people are starting to think, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not a great idea. And it's amazing, and it's wonderful to see from the African American community saying, hey, wait, not so fast. We don't want to defund. Our communities are getting hurt. And you guys, the opportunists that are pulling down statues and things, you're saying, hey, take away the police. And this was a plan that they may have had for a while, but we're seeing some really vulnerable segments of our communities being hurt by this defund movement. And so, we're seeing these all-time highs in homicides, these rises in homicides, Chicago at 700 homicides again. And so I think people are going to say, okay, let's break down some of these issues, the mental health, the homeless, the drug issues, and let's bring in some other people with expertise to handle those things. But let's get the cops to concentrate on the things that really mean the most. And I think that may be appealing to some. I mean, at my university, we are full up on our major in criminal justice. There was not a drop off at all. So I'm encouraged by that.
That's good. And I agree with you, sir. I mean, I think we're going to come out of this. It might take some time, but we're a resilient profession, and we've been through ups and downs. And we're going to come out of this stronger and better for it. Hey, there's the man, Adam.
There he is.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you, brother.
Awesome. Well, first of all, my apologies. What a clusterfuck. Never in a million years. I was literally on. Jim got on. I was like, hey, Adam. And then my system decided to implode on itself. So that was fun. I'm actually on my phone. So the video is coming from my phone, and I'm actually controlling everything on the computer. So it's a complete gong show on my end. I appreciate you taking over, though, guys. I appreciate you just having a conversation and going through it. That's pretty much what we were doing today anyway. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. This is crazy. This is craziness. So I'm gonna, you guys keep going through what you were talking about, because I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna probably end up just having you run these IRTs from now on. You're a much better host than I am. So that sucks as well. So we'll
no, man.
Your pay.
Technology issues happen, brother. But let's go. I want to go to Autumn again. And Jim, thanks for what you said, brother. And I agree with you. Autumn, you talk to a lot of people, like we all do. What are you seeing? Because you talk to a ton of people. What are you hearing and seeing? And you're still in the field. You're still a Leo. So what are you seeing? What's the big problems that law enforcement is struggling with right now?
So this puts me on my soapbox. So I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. I get very fired up over this. But before I go, Jim, can you please tell me what your Instagram is? I have everybody else tagged. What's your Instagram?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's Dudley 1946, and that's not my age, Patrick.
I was going to say it's not your age.
I knew you were going to jump in there. That was my star number, SFPD 1946. So it's Dudley 1946.
Got it. Okay.
And my alter ego is Naked Base.
I don't even want to ask what.
It's because no one will play with me. It's just the base. There's
a story behind that, Jim.
Yeah, I feel like we need to know the story behind that, Jim.
We're going to have a show about that.
I just told you the reason.
That's so funny. Okay, good. Perfect. I'll tag you. So as far as what I see, the biggest thing, there's a few things that are going into this. But it's really the fact that officers are feeling like nobody has their back. And we talk about this via the media, but really here's what everybody needs to understand. Being a cop, and you guys know this, but you sign up to know that a lot of people aren't going to like you. You don't sign up for this job to be, loved. If I wanted to do that, I'd have been a firefighter, right? You know what I'm saying? But that's not, we know that. But what's going on right now is that currently It's the lack of leadership. We have no leadership going on. Everybody's afraid to make a decision. They're afraid to say things. And because of that, our officers are boots on the ground. They're kind of like wallowing. It's like, who has my back? Like, and here's what I just want to put out there too, is like, and I know us five on here, and I know I can speak for myself specifically. Like, I'm really for the majority of the officers. I'd say like 99% of police are really good. We do have those bad eggs. And I'm not necessarily talking about them. I'm talking about the majority of us who are in the job for the right reasons. We're doing it. We're out there. We're trying to make a difference. I know, for one, the reasons I got into law enforcement were never to arrest a bunch of people. It was I wanted to go and be a role model for people, for specifically women and people who didn't think that they could become something. I wanted to be like, hey, look, if I can do it, you can do it, right? But the thing is that people like us, good people, are just feeling like everything they're doing, they're getting their nuts kicked in. They can't do anything. It's like, I can't do anything. I go and I have a conversation with this person, and from one side of the phone, it looks like, one picture, it looks like I'm doing something completely different. And then by the time I get back to the station, I've got a complaint on me. I'm getting written up. I'm in the IA. Nobody has my back. And it's like I go home, and the community, while it may not be in an uproar, like you said, the silent majority is not. They're being silent, right? For probably some sort of fear. So you go home, and who knows if like your neighbors and stuff support you or not. We don't know. And again, so I really just think that that's wearing on a lot of officers. They don't know where to turn. They are unsure of who they can trust, who they can talk to, and they're trying to navigate these waters right now.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I know from my experience, just kind of piggyback on that. Yeah, there is bad leadership out there, but there's good leadership too.
Yeah.
And the issue, and I know all of you know this, is that even the chief of police has somebody that they answer to, and they have mayors, city councils, city administrators. So sometimes it's been in my experience that sometimes, not in all situations, but the chief or the commanders or whoever, the command staff of an organization, they have the back of their officers in a lot of cases. Again, maybe not in all cases, but they're just doing what they're told to do from the city council, city administrators. And that's where, when you start getting up to those levels, I'm not trying to, hopefully I don't sound bad with this, is that you have that 30,000, 40,000 foot view now of the PD. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is very political, and it sucks, but that's just the way it is. But I agree with you, Autumn. I think that is, because I've heard that before from a lot of people, is they feel like the command staff does not have their back.
Absolutely. And
being a former command staff member, I can tell you it's unfortunate. That's probably the case in some cases, but it's not the case in all cases, because a lot of times the command staff wants to go a certain way. And that has to, you have to stand up for your officers. I get that. But again, the command staff has to answer to other people too. It's not just the police or the deputy chief or the sheriff that can make all the decisions. They have to answer to people. And so they might not agree with it, but they have people that they have to answer to too. So,
but Pat, if I could jump in on that, I think you're both right. I think the leadership void is apparent right now. And the fact that we've had so many chiefs retire or resign or quit, I think that's telling. And I really respect Carmen Best from Seattle. She stood there and went toe to toe with the city council and the mayor, and she did what was best for the troops and said, hey, I'm not going to do these things because you're going to leave my troops vulnerable. So she did the right thing, but essentially they cut her knees out from under her, and she did have to finally resign. So that's sort of reinforcing the others that are saying, hey, I either cut bait and get out of here, or I'm going to stick around and go at this constant, like you can use another reason to get an ulcer in policing, right?
Yeah.
Head to head with your mayor and your city council. So I don't know what the answer is, except to say that if you have enough time in the business to retire and you're a chief, fight the fight. I mean, if you're a 40-year-old taking a chief's job, well, you know, comes with the territory. But I mean, I really respect those that are staying in there and fighting rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to hand the job over to somebody who will do exactly what they're telling you to do.
And don't you think, great comments. I mean, don't you think that it's a leadership void, like you said, Jim, and it's a leadership issue, like Autumn said. But don't you think the problem? I don't want to go down necessarily a political path per se, but don't you think it's just more than that? I mean, it's how law enforcement is perceived. It's the media, trashing law enforcement. It's teaching young kids, to hate cops. And I mean, it's just so. It just seems like it's so much bigger. You know what I mean? That it's this thing has tentacles all over the place that come back to law enforcement, and it just, it's just permeating now.
Yeah. Well,
so,
that's one thing I want to say about the Fed world. You mentioned politics a little bit, but every administration, we change out our political appointees at the top. So our whole top layer chain of command it gets scrubbed. We get the executive orders, we get the chain of command coming out with new orders. So there's never any snapshot that's going to be there every 4 years, because every administration, regardless if it's a re-election or not, always changes something, and your chain of command is always going to change. And hey, you know what? That same media puts a target on one of these senior leaders that came in from the outside, and they're there for about 6 months to a year, or maybe 2 months, and they get crosshairs on them, and they're out. There's nothing. There's no saving their hide. They're out, and then everybody else has to just get in line. And so that's the thing. That's why you see a lot of, and that's one good, one plus, and one negative of the Fed world is we can jump around. The retirement does stay the same in most agencies, but then you're gonna have a lot of your good talent going to other agencies and just keep moving. That's why when you hear me, I've had 7 different badges over the past 20-something years. So.
Why do you think that, and I know, Autumn, you and I have talked about this a lot, why do some people get promoted and they have no reason? And this goes in with what Autumn was talking about, but it's like, it's so crazy that the last, and I've just from my experience, the last person I thought would be promoted, gets promoted, and they're toxic to the organization. They don't do anything. What's that?
What did you just say right there? They don't do anything.
Yeah.
Is because if you don't do anything, what happens? There's no paperwork, there's no problems. No paperwork equals no problems. And if you're proactive, if you're active, and being proactive doesn't mean you're going to be like, Jack who'd have thought I'm going to, knock down people's doors. Proactive rolls into the whole community-oriented type areas. I'm not going to say cops or community-oriented police. I'm going to say, look, these are the ones that are actually out there being proactive, talking to the neighborhood, talking to the people out there, developing human sources of information that can be provide information. They're the ones that are being proactive. And the ones that support them, their leadership, their sergeants, their sometimes lieutenants, don't typically make it past sergeant or lieutenant. Or in the Fed world, they don't make it past supervisor because they don't get, when you're proactive means, man, something bad might happen out there. Something might be in the news. Something might make it so I can't rise up those ranks. And it was the same thing in the military. So that's why you'll see a lot of these, you have to really take a good, solid look at your senior leaders that are, controlling your proactive forces. And that's PDs, feds, everything, man.
And I always used to say, if we don't have people that are qualified and can lead, I'd rather go without a sergeant or a corporal on the street rather than promoting somebody who doesn't deserve to be there. And then you're dealing with a bigger problem down the road. I mean, you've been in those positions. Yeah. So.
Well, that's the thing, though, a lot of times, well, at least in the Fed world, and I can only speak to the Fed world, while I have been on HIDTA task forces and fugitive task forces and everything else throughout the years. But in the Fed world, if you don't promote someone, you may lose that position. And if you lose that position, you're not going to get it back. So a lot of times you're going to see a lot of people who just rise straight up the ranks to senior levels. And, how can you go from entering the service and 6 years later, you're like 2 steps from the top of the chain of command in the federal government, literally next to the person who sits next to the president sometimes. It should not work that way. Mm-hmm. You should have to be able to have ground truth. And that's one topic I always love talking about is ground truth. If you're not getting a view from the field, if you've never been to the field or you don't even know what the field looks like, how do you really know what's going on out there?
100%.
And you see that they're pulling in chiefs from anywhere to run these big or small PDs out there who have never been to the field, but they look at their resume is spot on. It is good. You know, they may spend $2,000 to have some resume person up there, but or they may just know someone, and we all know how that works.
Yeah.
Can I just ask that question? I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on that. As far as, what is your opinion on street cred versus education? I know the perfect combination is both, right? But what will you take? In this scenario, you don't get that opportunity. You know, you're going to promote a guy to chief that has no degree. Would you do that if he's or she's been running an agency quite well? What, like, as like a 2 or a 3? What do you think?
I think
I think go ahead.
Pat. Now, I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
you can be proactive and still get your degrees, check your blocks, go to the proper schooling. You shouldn't just have street cred, and you don't necessarily need a bachelor's, associate's, or doctorate or whatever. God knows I don't need any of that stuff, but I have it. But you should have some sort of training, whether or not it's leadership training or something, mentorship training. You should be out there not just being there like, hey, you know what, I know how to command and control this person, because it's great that you can move humans around, but do you know all the other logistics that goes behind carrying that, you know, the bars or the stars on your shoulder? You have to be able to move logistics around. You have to know what financials are. You have to know what spreadsheets are. You have to know how to brief people. You have to know how to talk. You can't just be like, hey, look, there's a door over there. Go through that door. Let's do this. I'm right behind you. I'm right in front of you. I think you have to have a combination of both. It's imperative.
Yeah, I think you need to have critical thinkers too. And I think we all see the value of an education. We all teach, right? So I think we all see that. And I don't know any agency that's recruiting for a chief that's not asking for command college or perf or IACP or the FBI National Academy, something like that, some executive leadership training. And you know, every once in a while you see something about a smaller department, and then you look into it, and it's a chief and a deputy chief and a K9, right? And that's half of the agencies are less than 50 people. So there's a lot of those going on, and I'm sure they hire from within. But we just did a survey on Police One, and something like 83% of the respondents of 4,000 respondents all had at least an AA, if not a bachelor's or master's, and there was like 2% PhDs. So I think that's sort of reflective of the national standard. And I mean, you want your upper management people to be able to go into other situations beyond policing, to talk with the city government people, with the, you know, learning institutions and Department of Public Works and recreation and parks and all those things. So I think the bottom line is critical thinking. You need people who can take problems and work the solutions out, and not alone. Of course, they're going to consult, but you want somebody who can think on their feet at a community meeting, know the right things to say. Pat, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but I agree with Autumn. You know, I mean, to some degree, I don't think a piece of paper, is necessarily, makes you, necessarily better than another. I think, some of the smartest cops I ever worked with didn't have degrees. They weren't college educated and stuff like that. But I think, it's just the way the profession is. Like you said, Jim. I mean, I remember. I have a couple graduate degrees, and I remember the expectation when I became a commander is I wasn't going to go to NA because those are few. We already had people that went and came back, but I went to Northwestern, which is another leadership school, and that's just the expectations now with command staff is they're going to have these specialized schools, or they're going to have I don't know any chiefs that don't have at least a master's degree. At least I know some chiefs that have doctorates. So that's just the expectation now. But let me preface, let me just, I don't believe that somebody who has a degree is necessarily better than somebody who doesn't have a degree. It's all going to depend on the agency, but there's very few agencies I know out there that don't require the upper echelon to have it. I mean, we were requiring our sergeants to have a bachelor's degree. That was the requirement. You start getting into those, you senior management roles. But yeah, education is very important. We're all educated. But yeah, that's a great question, Autumn. It was a really good question.
Just to give you, I just want to hit this home. So in Maine, we have a lot of 50-person departments or less. Our state police is comprised of 324 troopers. Like that. That's our biggest. Portland, Maine. Portland Police Department is the biggest police department, and I think maybe they have 400. Maybe. Okay, so that's very small up here. But what I want to say to you is, I worked for an agency who I won't tell you what kind of agency it was. I'm going to let you decide when I paint this picture for you. It was a 50-person department, and within 7 years, they had a turnover rate of 50 people. And
leadership issue.
Let's just put it this way: the chief retired because he had to. He got forced to. The deputy chief became the chief. Within 2 years, he was forced to retire because of some stuff. When I worked there, just so you know, I was the second highest educated person in the entire agency. I was boots on the ground. That was it. And the most educated person was a detective. He had his master's. My master's was halfway completed. So I do think, I asked the question, but I think street credit, like Pat said, I think it's huge, obviously, because we don't, and just like Jason said, we don't, if you don't have, what did you call it? It was something truth. Is it street truth? What did you call it?
Truth.
Ground truth.
I love that term. I'm going to start. That's going in my repertoire. I love that. So ground truth, and it's nobody's going to respect you. But from experience, I have to say, some education, you need something, because if not, it's not good.
Well, and I always told cops too. I always say, look, do not rely on the department for your education. We have mandated hours from post and stuff like that. But take it upon yourself to continue your education outside of a post-required class, outside of and there's so much information out there. So do not rely solely, well, I guess I got to go to this training, the department. There's so much information at our fingertips now. You're in control of your training and development. Yes, the department has a role, but don't rely on them solely for your continuing education.
Good point.
Well, take a look at is it ILET network?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
There you go.
Look at what Adam's doing.
Adam's the man.
Yeah, all this free training
Worldwide.
There's no excuse.
Adam, what you got there? You got a little
Joe Secchi's.
It's the NA version, right?
Hey, I didn't know this was a drinking roundtable. Let me go get
It's always a drinking roundtable. You should have known better. We did the one on the ILET event on the actual summit. We did one, and I think the majority of us had drinks.
Love it.
I know there's probably 3 or 4 of us with scotch. I know Scott Savage had a wine, and we were making fun of him for it. Things like that. But it's loose here, loosey goosey. To your point, what you guys were talking about, formal education and leadership. It kind of, for me, it's a weird subject, because I'm kind of on the opposite side of things, in that I'm not a fan of formal education. I have it, but I'm not a fan of it, especially in the law enforcement military space, because too many people think that because you have a degree, it means you're intelligent. Yeah, and intelligence and education are two totally different things.
Yeah.
And same thing with leadership, right? We've all seen those leaders that it's the patrol officer on the ground that is the natural born leader. Yeah. Then that has to listen to 3 or 4 levels above him, that when they could flip roles and he or she would do a much better job. There is a balance there. There is definitely a balance. And for me, I think, command college is important, right? Whether you're in law enforcement, military, whatever, command college is important, but it really gives you the skills it gives you the logistical skills and the skills to organize and the skills to do all the paperwork that's needed at those higher levels. Because the higher you go, the less time you get in the field. And so the more heavy and intensive that paperwork becomes, and that's important. But it really has to be, it's a growth curve, right? And What I think we need to be doing is identifying those leaders from day one in the field. And you know, you go to a mass scene and out of nowhere, you have this patrol officer who's automatically taking charge, who's controlling the crowds, who's telling other officers, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this. That's the person we need to pull out and be like, okay, let's identify them for a promotional chain because they're the ones that we need to have in those higher level positions down the road. I think that's something that we're missing, and I think that should be something that's put into every agency.
Yeah.
But, you know, can I just say something? And I would love to hear you guys' opinion on this. Adam, I fully agree with you. From my experience, and tell me if you guys have had other experiences. From my experiences, though, is that what's going on is because we have a lot of insecure people in leadership positions that they don't like that. Because I'm going to tell you, on the road, it was my scene. And I wasn't being, I'm not, it was just, that's just how I am. It was just like, do this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden, I'd have a sergeant or a lieutenant who just wouldn't like that. And so instead of pulling me aside or trying to fix that and help bring that out of me, they'd be like, no, you need to stop. Or we're not listening to you. Or they just, do you know what, do you kind of hear what I'm saying? Because I see that a lot, not just with me, but I see it a lot in law enforcement. What's going on with the culture? Why are we seeing that?
Yeah, well, it would be great to be able to reward those working people. And like Pat says, you know, the guy who goes, or Jason, I guess, goes through the scene and takes control, takes leadership roles in the field. But, you know, I've been on that side of the desk too, where you're trying to come up with a test that's fair and equitable. And then we try to introduce where we give them an opportunity to talk about a project or something that they've done. And the outside raters, they can't tell whether or not the person's speaking the truth. I could be taking the credit for, you know, Pat's work ethic and saying, oh yeah, I had, you know, vice president on my show and blah, 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 but it may not have happened. So it's hard to quantify that. And how would you quantify that on a promotional? And if you were just going to leave it up to the chief's selection, then you're just opening the door for another, you know, corrupt process.
Yes, so true.
Cronyism. That's one thing I hate the most out of everything is cronyism.
Yeah.
Gone are the days of
I know there'd be
a lot of people move around, but cronyism.
I know there'd be no way to do this from an operational perspective, but when we do courses, we do like top 5, bottom 5 peer reviews, right? That would be awesome to implement across the board. I don't know if that would ever work because you know the person that's getting those is gonna be talking, so it's really difficult to do. But I mean, that's a fantastic way to show who's there and who isn't. But it would be almost impossible to implement.
It works in the military because I think
you'd have to put a watch on the bottom 5.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pat.
No, I know I stepped away. We were talking about promotional processes, or
yeah,
we all got promoted.
Or something like that.
We all got promoted except for you.
Yeah, because we're getting a drink. Did you go get a drink?
Yeah, that's the one thing. Yeah, I did get a drink. I got a low calorie Coors
seltzer. That's almost worse than the wine, but that's fine.
Well, my daughter, I asked her to go out and get my daughter, who's like a huge fitness buff. She said, "I'll go out and get some stuff for tonight," and she brings me back this.
Oh man,
I do. May be the only person I've ever seen drink that.
Great. This is live streaming.
I have.
I got some whiskey.
Product placement.
I've been drinking. Yeah, right. Yeah, cover that with some black tape, will you? Jesus. I've been drinking the Michelob Ultras. Actually, I'll drink those. Those are good.
Low fat, low carb.
Yeah. Because I could drink like 30 or 40 of them, and I feel great. Right. So.
Canadian, listen to it. 30 or 40.
I know.
Yeah.
You guys are probably Autumn, you're probably too young, but I remember in Colorado when I was growing up, they used to have 3.2 bars. 3.2 bars was 3%, 0.2 alcohol, and we used to have the legal age to drink in Colorado. It was 18. I mean, you would have to go to these. You have to drink this what we called near beer. But I remember these little 18-year-old bars were all over the place when I was growing up in Denver. So anyway, this reminds me of near beer. It's not really beer. It's kind of near beer.
Yeah, it's one thing about the U.S. You guys, I mean, aside from some of the countries in the Middle East, you have the highest drinking age. I mean, any Commonwealth country, I think the average is 18 or 19 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is split by province.
So it's like 14 in some places, and
yeah, like Quebec. Yeah. No, it goes like the way it works is it goes from BC. So if you go across the provinces, and I don't expect everybody here to be up on their geography, but essentially it goes 19, 18, 19, 18, 19, and then 19 across the board on the East Coast. But yeah, it's weird just how our provinces decided, like arbitrarily, like we're going to go with this age. Didn't make any sense.
Do they still make Labatt's, Adam?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm in Manitoba, and Gimli, Manitoba is just north of Winnipeg, and that's where the Crown Royal comes from.
Hey, now you're talking.
Yeah.
Well, growing up, we used to say that Canadian beer was a one can of Budweiser thrown in a 55-gallon drum of water.
I think you got yourself mistaken there, my friend. Well, tell you what. Here's what we're gonna do next time. I'm gonna send each of you a 2-4, and we'll sit down and we'll see who falls out of their chair first.
It'll be me.
There was a question here. Jeff posed a question. I'm just gonna pop it up on the screen here. It's kind of a two-parter. He said it's probably premature for questions, but I want to put this one out there. When you are running a podcast or social media platform, how do you balance the content aimed at aiding the masses? And then in parentheses, mental health, sleep hygiene, etc., versus trying to connect on a human level, joking around, sharing personal anecdotes, etc., especially with first responders being under a microscope. Well, that's a great question, and you're lucky because you have people here that kind of do all of the above. It's personal preference, man. It's personal preference. It's whatever you feel like is going to give you that vessel to bring your voice across, right? We'll go around. Go ahead, Jason. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'll start. I started doing because I started really trying to focus a lot more on video content and either shorts, whether it's 20, 30-minute conversations, is I started doing like the Protector, the life, and the life would cover like those light topics where I interview an author or I interview anybody in the media who is not really going to get in depth and really not going to cause me at the end of it to go, man, I really need that drink. But I do also do the one where I go, hey, you know what? I do a whole series on topics that really matter. Like I'll do like sex trafficking. Can you spot the sex trafficker? Can you do this? Have you been exposed to burn pits? Have you been exposed to toxic exposure? Stuff like that. So I like to do two things that I like to focus, like just like you said, on things that really touch me, and not necessarily look at this whole spectrum of me trying to really be the audience, because a lot of times if it really, my audience is kind of the same areas that I am. They like that kind of stuff. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I like a balance. And you have to pick your spots with who you can joke around with. I had the Narcos guys, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena on the show. Those guys are just awesome. And they're the joviality, and they're so collegial, and they're great, and you just let them riff. But it's hard when you're talking about suicide or survivors of violent crime. No joking at all. But especially after COVID and then the defund movement, I felt myself leaning towards guests that were more supportive of policing in mental health and well-being. Stephen James, I think one of you just had Stephen James too, didn't you? Dr. Stephen James on sleep. Awesome. If
that was me. I should know that. It was me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here. I'm like, that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
Know your guest. Know your own guest, Adam.
How many bears deep are you, Adam?
He was on the National Emergency Responder Conference.
Yeah, I had him on my show. And we talked about the whole range, and I think for me, it felt good letting the listeners, my listeners, like probably most of yours, are mainly law enforcement personnel, public safety people. And so I look to do something that'll lift their spirits a little bit, or give them some health benefit, or help them, have a better attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of joking though.
Pat?
Yeah, kind of reiterate what Jason and Jim said. I mean, I'm pretty selective, as I imagine most of us are, on who comes on the show. I want, the content to be extremely beneficial for the first responder. And my show is kind of diverse in the fact that I talk about different things. Mainly it's criminal justice issues, a lot of it, but I like to bring on other people, like I said before we started, who talk about other things like nutrition and fitness and, finance stuff and entrepreneurship, because I think a lot of us are going to retire. Most of us, we're all going to retire one day. God forbid that's nothing worse, but we're going to branch on to do other things. And I like to talk about those issues that really resonate with first responders, because I think a lot of us want to have a side gig or do something on the side. So I have people that talk about entrepreneurship and things like that, but I'm pretty selective of who I have on the show. And what I found is it's not so much spreading it out, but it's a matter of niching it down a little bit more, because you don't want to be so diluted that you're talking about everything. And I talk about different topics, but I try to really understand what kind of the pain points are with our first responders and what they're really struggling with and what they can do to kind of improve their situation, like fitness, finance, entrepreneurship. Because I don't think I've met one cop out there or talked to one guest who doesn't have some side gig or doesn't want to improve their social media or doesn't want to start this or write a book or whatever. And that's why I like having a little bit more diverse show, people on my show to kind of not only, like Jim said, talk about, motivating and inspiration, but it's not all, to me, about law enforcement. Yeah, it's a criminal justice show, but I like to show different aspects that officers can take after a life of law enforcement, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of cops out there that want to do side gigs and write a book and stuff like that. So I like having a little bit diverse guests on that can talk about that. But I like talking about, we do talk about some doom and gloom topics, as you all know. But I like my overall premise behind, or kind of feel behind the show is uplifting. It's motivating. I mean, we all cops have enough shit that they're dealing with on a daily basis. They don't need me to talk about the doom and gloom. So, so I try to do, like most of us, we try to have, or all of us have, like an uplifting tone and motivational tone behind our show.
Autumn?
Well, except for me. No, but.
No, Adam's awesome.
If you go to the first,
love your show.
Thank you. If you go to the first season of my podcast, it was just me riffing, because here's what I just want to say. Everything you guys said is just yes, but I just think it goes to the individual. So my podcast is completely different than anybody else's. Mm-hmm. I have the first and only self-help podcast for first responders hosted by a female cop. You come to my podcast, it's like you and I are pulling up car to car. We're going to have a conversation, and we're going places people don't typically go. But that's just because that's who I am, mm-hmm. and it's naturally fitting to my personality. I have to be honest, and this sounds selfish, but I did not start my podcast for anybody except me. And it sounds selfish, but hear me out on that. But because I did it that way, it has helped so many people, because I just shoot from the hip and I talk to you straight from my heart. If you listen to like my second to last, I just 2 podcasts ago on Changing the Culture podcast, my podcast is me driving in my car, and it's 20 minutes of just me telling you what's going on. Like,
I saw that. I loved it.
Yeah, it's just me. But if I were to try to make my show like Jim's or Jason's or Adam's, it just wouldn't work. So the answer is you balance it all by going all in on who you are. Because my listeners, I'm going to tell you, well, right now, not yet. I don't have millions of listeners, working on that. But I will tell you, my listeners are loyal. And it's because I'm who I am. And I'm like, I will go and I'll have like a mood swing and like not put anything out for like a month because I have nothing to talk about. And then right when I put stuff out, my listeners are there. So if the gentleman who asked this question, like if you're thinking about starting a podcast or anything, just the best advice in like what everybody said is they just everybody went all in on who they are. And if
authentic, yeah.
Exactly. Like you guys all talk about shit that you like, and that's what makes you good at it, and that's what makes your talk about your beer, have a cheers. Yeah.
No, I'm cheering you, Autumn.
Cheers. Yeah, but you can talk about your beer, and if it's what you like, it is, you know what I mean? I'm having water.
Me too.
Okay, cheers, Jim.
Well, that's the one thing that I really piggyback really quick on Autumn is we're all authentic in our different space. We all are talking about the same stuff, but we're all authentic and genuine. That's what I love about Autumn. She just shoots it from the hip, and that is authenticity. And that is what people want in this social media world. There's plenty of posers out there, the people who think, trying to act like they're somebody else. Authenticity is what it's about. So like Autumn said, great advice, be authentic when it comes to a podcast.
And go ahead.
And you don't have to be a specific format. Like me, I just started doing, when I want to get out information, and I love what Autumn's doing, and I think I really like just talking. I have 30-something years of crap that's bungled around in my brain from law enforcement and military. Why not talk about it?
Absolutely.
And that's, last about 3 episodes of this new season I have are me talking about those topics, like human trafficking. I love talking about that stuff because I want awareness out there. Burn pits. I was in a burn pits in a war. I want to talk about that. If I want to talk about mental health and drinking and this and that, I want to talk about it. If I want to talk about and what am I carrying for my everyday carry? I talk about it. I do it. I just, everything I do now is not monetary because I'm building for my second gig because I'm still an LEO. So maybe later on when I want to monetize and start really hammering down on this, I might do it. But for now, I'm just enjoying myself. And if you're going to do a podcast, don't get into it if you think you're going to make money.
Yes.
Because I think that's the first. Joe Rogan's been at this game for 10 years. Stop it, okay? Stop. Just get into it. You enjoy it. Now I'm getting a ton of affiliates. I'm getting all this other stuff, but don't get into it for money.
I would echo what Autumn said there about doing it for yourself. I think that was the biggest thing for me when I started this. It was something that I just wanted to do because my wife says I just talk too much, but it was a good outlet for all that energy and all that knowledge. And I always say this on my podcast, I'm never the expert. Like when I want somebody to come on, I bring on the experts. So if you're listening to me, you're not coming to my podcast to listen to me. You're coming to listen to the people that I bring on. And that's just, for me, that's the coolest part about it. I keep telling people first, before I forget, I owe Autumn's listeners another apology. So I was on Monday. She had me booked in to come on her show, and I'm sitting there, and we're in different time zones. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, we're good to go. Like I'm ready to go and ready for 6 o'clock. Except it was 6 o'clock her time, not my time. And so for me, I ended up being a little bit late, about half an hour. So again, my apologies. My apologies. I didn't even know. Here's my issue. I didn't know you were doing like kind of a live thing with your audience, so I felt even worse. I was just like, oh my god. I tried to play it off like I wasn't a complete idiot, but I felt so bad.
Well, no, you shouldn't have. It worked out perfect. So as far as like monetization, what I've done is I've created a mastermind around my podcast. So I have members that pay me, and they are in this mastermind, but they also get to come and they listen to you guys and talk to all of my guests live. But Adam, it was perfect because I hadn't caught up with them in a couple of weeks. So it was great to it was great. We had a half an hour. I'm like, whatever, let's just stay on. Maybe he'll come on. Let's just talk, whatever. And so that's what happened. And then you popped on and everyone was like, he's here. Like,
yeah. Felt so bad.
No.
Jeff, if you're still on, I'm wondering if those answered your questions, brother. Give us a shout in the comments there if we answered your question or if you have any more. It kind of brings us into another thing talking about podcasts, right? There's a lot of people getting into podcasts right now. I know, buddy Adam Wills just started a podcast. He's a active Leo, and I was his 7th interview, something like that. He had guys like Scott Savage on and stuff like that. Scott's making his rounds. Holy hell. If you guys haven't had Scott on your show, just let me know. We'll send him your way. He loves doing podcasts now. So Adam did his podcast, and all these people are jumping into this podcasting realm, and everybody has questions. How do I name my podcast? What do I do? Like all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting because I think all of us will have a different opinion. For example, for me, for my title, I wish I may have thought a little bit differently on my title, because I thought I was being clever calling it Tactical Breakdown, because in my mind it was like kind of a double entendre, and I was thinking of tactical in 2 different ways and breakdown in 2 different ways and all these different things. And then I was realizing, I'm like, everybody thinks this is a goddamn tactical show where we're just going to talk about kicking in doors. And I was like, so I was like, shit. And so now I'm just rolling with it. But so people get so stuck in the mud on, I can't launch my podcast because I don't have the perfect title. I don't have guests lined up. I don't have this. I don't have that. And it's kind of just like, just start. Yeah. Just do it. Yeah. Like Autumn, I think you're the one, you rebranded essentially, right?
I don't give a, that's what I'm saying. I don't give a shit. I'm doing it for me. Like, I love my people. They know that I love them. But like, don't be doing it for you. Like, I mean, don't be doing it for your people, and don't be worried about what anybody else thinks. And like, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I recorded so much on my phone. I didn't have this beautiful blue Yeti. I didn't have this. And I'm going to tell you something. The content was so good, no one gave a shit. And people just listened. And like, it was just, and when I see the content was so good, it was good for my people. I'm not trying to sound confident. Well, I am confident, but I'm not trying to sound cocky. It's just that it was good for the people that listened, right? So Adam, just to piggyback on that, like, I do get really fired up. One of the things that I get fired up on is people that just dilly-dally around. Like, stop dilly-dallying. We don't have time for that. You don't have time. Here today, gone tomorrow. If you really want to start a pod, you have something to say, and everybody has something to say. Get out there and start. And I don't care how you start. You could start anyway. I started with voice memo on my iPhone. That is how I started this podcast. I didn't have anything, and I went on Libsyn. You can go and Libsyn, they have a free thing so that you can just host your podcast and you just get it out there. And yeah, I've rebranded 3 times. Whatever.
Well, and I like what you said, Adam, is, look, I always tell people the traffic lights of life are not going to be green all at the same time. So quit procrastinating. If you want to start a show and do it and kind of build it as you go. I didn't have all my shit together when I started my show. I don't think anybody did here when they started this show, but I took action and did it, and you learn along the way. Because Adam Autumn alluded to it, we don't, in the reality of things, we don't have a lot of time here, so do it. Quit procrastinating and do it. There's so much contact out there to learn from. I mean, it's, learn from, people who have podcasts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the content, like Autumn said, the content is so important. And maybe the question from your listener was about the joking around. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and if you listen to some of these podcasts, these guys are yucking it up for like 20 minutes before they get to the content. And I don't listen to those. I just turn them off. And so I know all of you, I've heard all of your podcasts, and you guys are great about getting right to it. So I think, if you brand it as a title of, today we talk about sleep and driving on patrol, you better be talking about that, not your kid at grammar school and, what are you going to have for dinner?
Yeah, that's good. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Pat. Especially in the beginning until you've built up an audience. That's a great point, Jim, because I don't mean to be mean, but I'll just tell you the way it is that, like, I don't give a shit. I don't know you yet. Like, who the hell are you to tell me? I don't care unless you start that rapport with me. And you know what I'm saying? So you're just so right. Like, stick to what you say. Once you've grown an audience, if you want to shoot this shit and talk about your dog, then because you have buy-in, your people will probably listen. And that's why Jocko can do what he does, and Mike Ritland. They have these podcasts. Have Mike Ritland's podcast, and he talks like this, and he has the best, like one of the best podcasts, but that's because people bought in with him, so he can do that.
But I just want to comment on really quick about rebranding. Look, I've been toying around with rebranding, and I'm almost 400 episodes deep. But I think rebranding is a good thing, like Autumn said, because it keeps it fresh. Now, and your followers and the listeners are going to follow you because I don't think it necessarily matters what kind of, name you have on the show. But I think rebranding, again, is a good thing. You want to make it fresh in this era of social media. You want to keep it fresh.
I just rebranded every season. I rebranded. It seems the first was the Protectors. Then I was like, you know what? I need to start actually branding myself. So then it was Jason Piccolo as the Protectors, and now it's the Protector Life.
Yeah,
is because you know what? And the thing is, like, I want it to be around Protector Life because it's a lifestyle. It really is. Everything I talk about. And when you rebrand, you could refocus. And every time, because you're just continuously learning. Adam knows this, and I don't know if you guys were all in the military. Pat, Jim, Autumn. I know, Pat, were you in the military? You were at 82nd Airborne, right? Yep. Jim. Because as an infantry officer, when you have a fighting position, you're always improving it. You're always improving it. And that's the same thing whenever you write. You're always improving your book, you're editing, you're drafting, you're doing this. Same thing with the podcast. You always want to improve it. So, when I first started out, I did the same thing. Started out with my phone. Phone went to, a different looking for different equipment, different this and that. And now tonight, and you could do stuff like that. I'm on my iPhone because I'm on the road.
Cut him off.
And cut me off my water. But yeah, rebrand.
He got into the mini bar.
Oh, I wish. Oh, do we want to talk about? That's one of my next podcasts. I've been dry for 4 months now.
Congratulations, brother.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
30 pounds. I could see a dimple. Where is it? But that's the thing though. It's like I could talk about topics like that. So don't worry about topics. Get on there, but if you're gonna have a topic, exactly what Autumn said, talk about that topic. People want to learn. That's one thing I've learned out of all of this is that I want to watch a show like this tonight because I want to learn something. If you're just talking about grandma's cooking over Thanksgiving, it's not going to work. It'll work for your family and friends, but do you want to just do a podcast for them, or do you want to get your message out there? Because I want to learn from everybody, because everybody has some sort of story that's going to give me almost like a therapy session when I'm done with a podcast. I love doing podcast interviews with guests because every time I talk to a guest, I learn something new. And you don't have to go, it's nice to have a scripted format. I do that. I have a list of questions I want to hit. But then you just go with the conversation. You want to learn something. So make sure that whatever format, someone's learning something, whether it's you or your guest or, your audience.
Very good.
You bring up an interesting point. Solos versus guest shows. Those are, I don't know. I think Pat and I talked about this before. I hate solos. I hate them. I can't, I'll sit there and I'll be like, I got so much to talk about. And then I'll record and I'm like, awesome. I got a 5-minute episode. Let's roll it out. And I was like, screw it. I'll just bring this up when I'm talking to somebody. For me, I find it very difficult. I don't know what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I do a microcast Monday every Monday, and that's a very short kind of, get started for your week. But I'm with you, Adam. Now, when you get started in podcasting, that might be the only option. It probably will be for a while until you get some guests on your show. But I'm like you, man. I just can't talk to myself, for very long, and I need to have that interaction.
You're making Autumn sound crazy now.
No. That goes. I
just can't have a conversation with the voices in my head.
But that just goes back to what Autumn. That goes back to what she said before. I mean, people are different in their styles. I like having guests on the show. I can't remember the last time, and I'm not. I hope this doesn't come across as arrogant, but I haven't had a show in a long time where I had a 30-minute show where I was just talking about a topic.
Oh, that's me.
But again, I love having guests. I love having that interaction. And like Jason said, sometimes and another thing about my show is I sometimes provide questions to people but I sometimes, a lot of times I don't. I hit the top. I say, this is what we're going to talk about. And I just have a natural conversation. Mm-hmm. I've been on shows before where people are like, all right, Pat, number 3, I'm going to ask you the 3rd question right now. And it's not authentic. It's not a flow of conversation. So I agree with you, Adam. Everybody's different, but I like to have guests. I love the interaction. I love talking to people. I love the kind of back and forth banter that goes on.
Hey, but let me ask you, are you planning a end of the year wrap up, a 2020 wrap up? And are you going to do that with a guest or by yourself?
Who did you ask, Jim?
Any of you, but you, Pat, I'm asking you.
Well, it's interesting. I'm already kind of booked out, and I have a guest that's going to come on that it's probably going to be the finale for 2020. So again, I'm very blessed to have people, come on the show and reach out to me and want to come on, and like every one of you. And, but that took a long time. This goes back into starting a podcast. That took a long time to build, and you guys know that there's so many podcasts out there. I can't remember the actual statistic, how many podcasts are sitting on Apple Podcasts that, people get to like 20 episodes or 10 episodes and they quit. Not every podcast on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever is active. There's a lot of people that just say, hey, how come I'm not making millions of dollars after 2 episodes? And then they quit. I mean, it's a marathon. It takes a while, and each of you know this, to gain those followers and gain the credibility. It takes time and effort. We live in this instant gratification society. So my advice for people who want to start a podcast, first of all, have a specific, thing that you're going to talk about, something that's going to resonate with people, because we live in a 3-second world where there's so much social media out there. You got to really stand out. Mm-hmm. And second of all, you have to be in it for the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm starting to enjoy the fruits of my labor 4 years after starting a podcast. So it took a while, and it's still a long journey.
To Jim's question, I mean, for me, here's the thing. I suck at putting out episodes when I plan on putting them out. So if I did like a end of the year episode, it'd probably come out like January 13th or something. So it's not for me. I don't ever hit anything on a calendar. I'll do something more like 50 episodes, 100 episodes, those types of milestones. Yeah. For me, an end of the year thing it would be so. I'm so bad at the scheduling thing, dude. Like I can't even get on. I can't get an autumn show on time.
It's beer, dude.
Hey, but the FBI uniform crime reports don't come out till March, so you're ahead.
It's true. That's a very good point. But to Pat's point there, and something I was thinking about for solo versus guest shows, if you're starting out, getting guests is a great way to also help you build faster, right? I mean, you're leveraging that person's network as well. Pat and I talked about this on his building about your network that you have. If you're in law enforcement, if you're a first responder, if you're in the military, you have this inherent network of people that you've worked with your entire career that will probably support you if you haven't been a complete asshole to them. So that's massive leverage, and not a lot of people have that. We take for granted the brotherhood that we have, brotherhood and sisterhood that we have in law enforcement in the military, and it's super powerful. Right? I send this out to, guys that I went to basic with, and they're like, yeah, man, like sign me up. Like, how do I sign up? And it's just because you have that rapport built with them already. And getting people on your show or going on other people's shows is a great way to kind of get your name out there. But also, don't be a stingy cunt. Sorry for my language, but don't. I literally talked to somebody and they said, I don't want to go on that person's show because they only have like X amount of followers. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. I would go on someone's show if they had 1 follower, because that's one person that I could potentially convert over. And it also gives you more reps. The more reps you have, the more confident you are, the better the product becomes. We always say that you don't really have a good podcast episode till you're 20, 30, 50 episodes in. And you've settled into your groove. Absolutely. It counts if you're doing it on other people's shows as well. So if I do 25 of my own and 25 of other people's, there's my 50. Yeah. So it's about getting the reps in and doing and helping, and you're helping other people out as well, right? So like Jeff, if you're starting a podcast, brother, shoot me an email. I'll be your first guest. And I'm sure you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here for you to start you off. You'll get your first 5. I think that's so important. I think that's the coolest thing that we do in this industry is it's this huge, when I left the military, that was what I lost. I lost that camaraderie that I didn't have that group with me anymore, that I didn't have my brothers and sisters that I could just be with all the time. Now I have that because I'm talking to them every day.
Yeah.
Right. So I find that in this. And so you have to find what really drives you when you're doing these things and kind of just hold on to it. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that was kind of my thoughts.
And like we were talking about before, there are very few gatekeepers out there anymore where you have to go through a secretary or somebody who's like an agent or something like that. I'm not saying it still didn't happen, but a lot of guests that I've had on my show, some big names like all of you, I just reached out to them on social and say, hey, Jim, I really love what you're doing, brother. You're giving back to the law enforcement community. I would be an honor if you came on my show. I think my listeners would get, a lot of value from you coming on. And you know what, Jeff, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. I've had people say, no, I'm not going to come on your show. But the point is, with the age we're living in now with technology and all these social media, I love LinkedIn. That's one of my go-tos. I mean, I reach out to people all the time and say, hey, man, I'd love to have you on my show. And you know what? Most of the time they say yes. So there really is no reason anymore not to reach out to people and say, hey, would you love to come on my show?
And now
there's no gatekeepers anymore.
I'm going to tell you all my secrets. Just Venmo me $5. But here's my secret too about guests is somehow I got onto this author niche. So I have all the authors come in, but then the authors, now they're public relations person from like HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, every single one of them. When someone in my niche, law enforcement, military, whatever, is going to publish a book, I guarantee they'll be on my show because PR people, and you can ping them off of LinkedIn. And if you're not on LinkedIn and you want to do a guest-based show, get on LinkedIn. Type in producers, type in PR, and just start going down, look and find out who reps these people. IMDb Pro, because I've interviewed a lot of actors and stuff, people in that realm, is you go on Internet Movie Database and you find out who reps these people.
Yeah.
But social media is also the best. Make sure you're not just, you don't just follow them and the next thing you do is message them. Make sure you follow them for at least a day or two, so it doesn't ping up like, hey, this guy followed me, now he's contacting me. But do your homework,
And the one thing I would just say too, if you're reaching out to somebody like a big name like Gil Martin or Grossman or whoever, a lot of people that are well known, and it's just the way it is, what I'm about to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, panel, is you have to provide them value first. What value are you going to bring to them? So many people reach out to somebody famous or somebody say, hey, I'd love to have you come on my, well, what value, I know it sounds weird, but that's the way it is. What value are you going to provide for them? And that's a really big mistake that I learned the hard way. Reaching out to people saying, I'd love to come on my show. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do for me? Kind of thing, quid pro quo. So don't make the mistake of reaching out. I mean, I've been working on a really big name for a long time, but I've been kind of providing value for him for a while now in the hopes that, and it's not fake, it's genuine, but in the hopes that he'll come onto my show. So don't expect you just, getting somebody like Oprah on your show right away, because it's probably not going to happen. You are not providing any value to her. And I know that sounds weird, but that's a tip. That you have to provide value for that person, especially a big name that you want to come on your show.
I'm just
Jeff. Sorry, Jeff just chimed in and said, FYI, I wasn't planning on starting a podcast, but who knows? Sorry, Jeff, you screwed yourself. Offers off the table.
Do it. I'm not coming on your show if you're not starting.
Yeah. Oh, garbage. No, I'm just joking, Jeff. Go ahead, Autumn.
Well, and then I just want to go back and just kind of say, like, because we're talking about this, but as far as like the podcast, as far as single person versus interview,
she's gonna rip me now.
No, I just want to say this. I built a following, just me, so I was two seasons in before I even had it. I didn't even know I could have people, like, it just didn't even come into my head. I was like, no, like, I'm here. I have a lot to say. And I built that following so that when I reached out, it was like, hey, I have these thousands of listeners. Do you want to come on? And when you come on, let's pitch your book. Let's pitch your program. Let's pitch whatever. Let's do that together. And so that, I mean, totally like what Pat said, but that was how I grew, was myself. Talking to myself for, I don't do it for hours, but I do it for a half an hour. 20 minutes to a half an hour is my typical show.
It's like walking around with your body cam on all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, Pat, so what are you going to rebrand as? What's your new title?
I don't know. It's a great question, my friend. And it's CJ Evolution. I like the evolution because we're constantly evolving, getting better, and personally and professionally. But I don't know. That's a great question. I've been talking with my team and talking to some people I know, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll have some sidebar conversations with each of you. I probably will. But I'm really seriously considering about rebranding and coming up with something different to keep it fresh and to keep it fresh and engaged. I mean, I love, again, and I tell some people, they're like, well, why are you going to do that? I mean, people know you as this. And I'm like, well, why not? I mean, rebrand. I mean, you have to keep it fresh. I'm reading this great book by Brendan Kane. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's done a lot of work and marketing and PR stuff and social media stuff for like some pretty big names. But he talks about a hook point, and that's the name of the book. And no, I'm not a spokesman for Brendan Kane, but it's a really interesting book where he talks about, and I mentioned it before, living in this 3 to 5 second world. So for those people out there who are starting a show, what are you doing to hook people in, provide authenticity, a real genuine story to keep people engaged? Because the reality is there's so much noise out there. You have to, stand out. You have to do things, whether you're starting a podcast or not. And this goes into the rebranding, to keep it fresh. And it's really, really interesting read. I mean, it's really cool. So that's what really got me. I read the book about a month ago, and that's what really got my mind thinking about, hey, maybe it's time to rebrand.
Yeah,
I love that point. Go ahead,
I've been asked a couple of times about policing matters, and is that a mockery of something else? And I said, no, we've had it for 5 years and it wasn't a big deal then. But this year it became a big deal, and we talked about it, and we're sticking with it because it covers the gamut, right? Policing matters. It's not that policing matters more than anything else. And so I think we're going to stick with it.
Oh, good. And that's like you said, Jim, I mean, that's a collaborative decision. That's a team decision. And if it works, it's the old saying, why fix it if it ain't broke, kind of thing. And, but I really do what Adam's or what Jason, I mean, he rebranded several times, and he still has his loyal followers, and people are going to listen to him. So again, to each his own. I mean, but I'm seriously considering about doing something different.
And that makes me want to talk about authenticity. Can I bridge the gap, Adam? Do we have another topic? Can I bridge the gap? I want to
do whatever you want.
So,
it's open. You talk about whatever you want.
So I would love to just talk about with you guys. We're on this topic of authenticity, right? Yeah. So let's talk about authenticity in first responders, specifically law enforcement. And I really get on this, and Jim, I mean, as a former chief, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, because I have seen, and I mean, my experience might be a little bit different than you guys' is, right? Because my generation, boots on the ground, that's what I'm familiar with, right? And in this current era. So, but I just see, we have a lot of loss of authenticity when we get on the job. It's really what I see. Year 2, and in the first 2 years, you're trying to figure it out, right? And you're like, I'm trying to be like my FTO, and I'm trying to be like, the most squared away guy and the captain and this and that. And then it's like, people are gone. They just completely lose themselves. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic. And I think we all probably do it for the same reason. And I think, the career, the professionalism of law enforcement, they can't speak up for themselves anymore. So we're sort of the ground truth for policing when we bring on these experts, and they talk about things that cops can't talk about, that chiefs can't talk about. They're censored. There is no First Amendment when you're on the job or wearing a uniform or showing the patch. So, yeah, I think they're not so genuine for a reason, because they're afraid. I mean, guys have been fired. Cops and chiefs alike have been fired for social media posts or for saying something. I mean, sometimes you're a chief and you pull up and the guy says, "Oh yeah, the guy capped 2 people and he ran out the back door." And then you turn around, the media's there, and you say that, and then you find out, "Oh no, that's not what happened." And you're like, "Oh shit." So, you've been burned a couple of times and you're probably not going to talk. So, but I appreciate all of you in getting the word out and killing the urban myths and the urban legends. And I think for all of us who teach, we know these students come in and they're like, they're living in this world that is nowhere near what's the truth in law enforcement. So yeah, you gotta sometimes push against other faculty that are trying to indoctrinate students into thinking that cops are bad and nobody belongs in jail.
Absolutely. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I agree. I think I believe in authenticity, but I agree with what Jim said, being at those different levels is, I hate to say it, it's self-preservation, and you don't have a First Amendment right. You can't say what you think. And we live in this just weird age right now, unprecedented age, if you ask me, where God forbid, if you speak your opinion and it's you're speaking the truth, you might get canned or suspended or whatever, because it's just the age we live in, and it sucks. You can't be authentic. But I do think that, some are authentic. But again, I think it depends on the culture of the department. It depends. Each department's a little bit different in their culture and, what's accepted, not accepted. But I or I agree with Jim wholeheartedly. I've been in those situations as a PIO. I was acting as a PIO and, not having the correct information. And now you said something. And he's exactly right. Jim's exactly right. You only get burned a couple times, especially at those levels, and not even those levels, just as a cop, and you're reluctant to be authentic. And I know it sounds fake, but I mean, it's just, like I said, it's self-preservation, and you got to really be careful with what you say now, because we just live in this crazy age where, I mean, it's just amazing how law enforcement has changed in the 2 decades I've did it, and how it's evolving into something that I think is unrecognizable from when I started years ago. And change is good. Evolution is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think some of the stuff that we're onto now and the direction we're taking is just, it's going to cause, and we've all seen it, people to get out of the profession, like we've been talking about at the beginning. And it's sad, it really is sad. And that, people can't be authentic and speak their mind.
Jason, where do you think that's going to bring us, though?
I think it's cyclic. I shouldn't say this, but I just had this awesome marathon where I watched all the Dirty Harry movies.
I love Dirty Harry.
I remember. Yeah, I love them. But the thing is, when you go back, there had to be some sort of culture that when those movies were made, that the underlying, because if you really watch the Dirty Harry movies, it's about a cop who's Dirty Harry. But his chain of command did not back him once, and all they wanted to do was they had the public affairs in every episode. And I'm thinking, what were the 70s like? I want to go back and I want to start looking at the 60s and 70s, because the 60s, we're trying to get the protesters out there, the Vietnam War, the riots. The 70s, you had domestic terrorism. You had all sorts of stuff. Policing was, there was a lot of corruption in police. There was a lot of heavy-handedness here and there. But that's the media trade. The media was still there. Now we have social media. Just because we have phones and I'm talking to you guys right now doesn't mean we're any really smarter than we are back then. You still had smart cops. You still had smart people out there judging the police for anybody who did bad. But I want to see what the culture was like. Are we in a cycle right now, because we are coming off a 20-year war, 20 years of being at war, and now we have, a lot of stuff going on. But is it any different? Or is it just the access different? Were people back then just, Jim might be able to use back a little bit older than I am, but our thing's a little bit different.
Why did you?
He's at
oh
least
my
3
God,
years
you went
older.
there, Jim.
Is it because of the white hair,
Jim is,
Jason? What the heck?
Listen, just for men right here. And no, because as I get closer to 50, I keep thinking, I'm like, I think about the 90s, I think about the 80s, and think about how we addressed things like AIDS, about touching someone who had AIDS. Think about how we thought about gay marriage. Think about how we thought about a black and white person getting married, like when I was growing up. You know, things have changed. They're going to continue to change. But when it comes to policing, how much different are we? And did we always have kind of like the good cadre of people,
Yeah.
kind of the base of awesome policing? And did we always have a bunch of shitheads here on the side, whether they be a shit leader or whether they just be heavy-handed? Was it always like this? You know,
well, I think the difference. I think the difference, brother, between the different eras, and this is just my opinion, is that I remember growing up, it would be police would be kind of you didn't want to touch that topic because especially with politicians, that was like that off topic, kind of, you didn't want to get into the policing about a lot of problems, but now it's like a free for all where politicians openly attack law enforcement on both sides of the aisle, and it's a free for all. So I think in that regard, it has changed because when people see politicians openly calling for defunding and in some cases abolishing the police, I think, in my opinion, we have entered into a new realm of craziness because when I was growing up, I remember Walter Cronkite, and I'm a little older, but I remember him coming on the news. And you know what? You never really knew where Walter Cronkite stood on issues because the only thing he did was report the news. And then you decided which way you wanted to go. We are in a new era, in my opinion, where we have the media openly calling to go assault police. And it's just crazy. So I think in that regard, I think the policing issues have always been there, but I think I agree with you on that, but I think we're in definitely a new territory with politicians and the media just openly attacking law enforcement. I have never seen it before. I'm 51 years old. I'm not that old, but I mean, old enough to remember how it used to be. We've always had policing issues, but this all out assault on the police is just ridiculous. It's incredible, the era we're in right now.
Well, you're not as old as me, Pat. So there you have that. Jason. Hey, Jason,
listen. We're going to do a whole show on
Dirty Harry and today's policing. No, I think it was really reflective of the times. It's a little dated now, but I was actually in that era in the 70s when those movies first started coming out. I was a high schooler, and we had in San Francisco at the time, we had the Zebra murders, and we had Jonestown, and we had the Zodiac, and it was a real dangerous time. And I think that series sort of fed off of all of those issues.
Oh yeah.
And you had it was like a cowboy Western in modern times. And so he was the lone guy standing up against the political corruption. And I think if somebody were to make a movie about cops now, just like Pat talked about, they're being ping-ponged between the public and the politicians and the opportunists, and we don't want you messing with people doing drugs, but we want you to go in if a guy's not wearing a mask and crack down or go break up a birthday party or a beach party or what have you. And, that's where the cops get vilified by being put in the middle of these stupid situations. So at least Dirty Harry was going after hardcore criminals. I mean, a movie made in today's world is going to be about us, chasing people not wearing masks.
Yeah. I have to say, when you bring up stuff like the masks and law enforcement and everything, one of the most, and we talked about training in the beginning, is I love training. I love education. I love reading. I love having paper on the wall. But one of the most critical courses I've ever gone through was law enforcement and lessons of the Holocaust. And you know what agency I was working with that sent me there and sponsored me and paid for it was ICE. So ICE sent me to this course, and it was put on by the Holocaust Museum. I went over there for the day, and they showed exactly that. What was law enforcement doing during the Holocaust, and how could they possibly let it go on? And you need to have trainings like that. And that's open up the feds, that's open up the state and locals. I don't know right now what the status in the museum is. But yeah, you think about throughout the ages, and that's why I always go back to what was it really like for law enforcement since its inception? Is it just target areas? And, we talk about, Pat brought up the media, is I don't think you have as much trust in the media and much trust in what politicians are saying, because there are two distinct sides. There is no middle. And I think before you could find an outlet that was kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
And, I stopped doing politics a long time ago. I used to be on Fox all the time. I stopped doing this. My podcast always had zero politics. Since we moved with the rebranding, I want to talk about stuff. I want to be able to get out there and talk about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be left, right, red, blue, or whatever, but I don't want to be able to be too touchy on topics. Ruffle some feathers, because right now people are dying for information, and they're doing exactly what everybody wants. And we had a question before about starting a podcast. The reason people are so tuned into podcasts is because they don't have information flow that kind of aligns with the way they think. You can't find it in media. You can't find it in politicians. You can't find it in press statements. So a lot of people are going to these platforms. And I like to say, whoever the audience is out there, is that don't think of a podcast as just an audio platform, because think about what we're doing right now. When you record, whether that's a 10-minute audio video conversation on your phone or whatever, make sure you cross-platform it. Put it on the YouTubes, put it on Vimeo, put it on Amazon Fire TV. I'm on there now. Put it on everywhere. Just blast it everywhere. Get a webpage, start a webpage. Because if you want your message to really get out there, get it out there. And don't be shy. I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you have to, and that's another thing about starting a show is that you have to talk about, or I think it's important to talk about the uncomfortable topics that people try to avoid. And I've had those discussions with many guests on the show. But yeah, I agree with you, brother. I mean, it's good to have those discussions, maybe those unpopular topics, because that's what people are hearing all the time. They're hearing, the kind of politically correct stuff a lot, but it's good to have, those topics that kind of get people thinking. And, I'm with you. I love having people on my show that have different views. I just don't have people that have my certain views. I mean, that's not fun. I mean, you have to have people that have different takes and different. I mean, I remember I had a guy on my show about a year ago that, his name is escaping me now. He used to be a cop in Baltimore, was a cop for, 10 years. And he was during Freddie Gray, and he ended up leaving Baltimore. I think it was Baltimore where Freddie Gray was.
Yeah.
And so he ended up leaving the force and now hates the cops. But I wanted to talk to him on my show, and his name escapes me, but you can go on my site and see. You can just scroll. But I had that discussion just to try to see his side of the story, even though I didn't agree with where he was coming from. Again, it makes for an interesting discussion. So I like having people that not just align with my views, but different views, because that makes for a good interview.
So many interesting points there. One is the one thing I talk about all the time, which is get outside your bubble. And that kind of goes back to what Jason was saying too. But, we're getting this inundated with information from left, right, and center, but you usually get it from the clicks that you want to get it from, right? So if I'm on the left, I listen to, so I'm gonna try to put on my USA hat for a second. If I which is a whole other topic. I'm on the left, I listen to my MSNBCs and my CNNs. And if I'm on the right, well, I guess you don't listen to Fox News anymore. Whatever, what's the news? What Newsmax? But you usually go to what you're comfortable with, and that people that have the same opinions as you. And the problem is that we get into this echo chamber where you're getting the same information that's reinforcing your ideas, and then you build out on those ideas. I've had, in the last 3 months, I usually stay away from political discussions, but I found myself I've been thrust in the middle of it because every person I talk to every day is in the US for the most part. And it always gets brought up with what's happening with your election and what's happening, with the socioeconomic climate.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously have a unique perspective in that I'm Canadian. In essence, what happens in your election doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It does, but it doesn't to the point of, I don't have to live in the US. But one thing that I've done, and this is a discussion I have with everybody, is I say, when I want US news, I go and I watch Sky News out of Australia. I'll go watch the BBC. I'll watch a news channel outside of the North America and get independent journalism actually giving you the news. Because like Pat was saying with Walter Cronkite, it was, here's the information, make up your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what they are biased to their own extent, but they're a lot better at saying, here's what the right is saying, right? They'll be like, here's a story from Fox News, here's a story from CNN, here's what our reporter on the ground says, here's our opinion, now make up your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That is different than what's happening right now. And so when I have these discussions with people, it's really interesting. I had a discussion with a fireman on the West Coast who is very, very far left. And it was an interesting conversation, right? Because we're talking about policing, we're talking about first responders, and he's a first responder, and he's very, very far left. And we're having discussions, and it got to the point, I'm like, well, you support the military though, right? He's like, yeah, I completely support the military. I'm like, awesome. You don't want our troops getting killed overseas, do you? He's like, no. And I said, so then you at least agree with what Trump did, pulling troops out, and those 4 historic peace agreements that he got signed in the Middle East. And he was like, what peace agreements? And I'm like, there's the problem. And I said, listen, I'm not discounting your opinion on your ideas, but you don't have all the information.
Right.
So here's what I said. I'm happy to rehash this conversation, but I want you to go and get some independent information on this. And he gave me a bunch of points from the left perspective. And I said, please send me the links and the articles. And then I go and I'll actually list, and I'll do the same thing on my end, because I'm not going to ask somebody to do it if I'm not. And I'll get the opinion. And some of the stuff he showed me did change some of my perspective. And I don't know if what I showed him changed his perspective, but I think that's something that's missing in society right now, is people saying, I want to make up my own mind, right? It's more about who's popular on Facebook and making sure that people are supporting me on social media than it is about having your own opinion. And that's just something that I've noticed, obviously kind of 30,000 foot view watching over the shit show that is the US right now. But yeah, that's just kind of what I've been dealing with in and out every day, these discussions. And it's crazy when you think about how Australia is putting in federal provisions into their laws to regulate social media platforms, because they're like, we don't want this happening to our election, what just happened in the US. Right. So it's very, very interesting when you start seeing things out of the Commonwealth countries and their opinions on what's happening in the US. Some of it's right, some of it's wrong, but at least you're getting more of a holistic view of the situation versus what's just kind of in your own echo chamber with the news sources that you go to.
Yeah. And going back to what we were talking about, we mentioned defund the police, and that's the problem I have. We all teach, or most of us. And that's the problem I have where, and I'm going to pick on young people really quick. Not all young people, but I teach a lot of college students. And it's almost like, it's like the buzzword, defund the police. Well, we have, okay, so what do you think about that? Well, cops are bad. Cops are out there killing minorities at record numbers. Well, statistically, it doesn't back it up. It's not, what you're saying is not backing up what is really happening in law enforcement. Well, every cop goes out there and wants to kill people, or they're murdering people. Come on. No cop gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to go kill somebody, no matter what color they are. Are there bad cops out there? Absolutely. But it's what you were saying, Adam. It's that there's so much information out there. People just need to, not everybody, but some people just need to educate themselves better and vet out, try to see both sides of the story instead of just using the anti-police movement again, just hopping on the anti-police movement, just to pick a side without really knowing any research or anything like that. And unfortunately, that's the era we live in right now, where people are just kind of following the lemmings and with not vetting the information, just go along with the crowd. And that's the power of social media, I think.
Yeah.
The negative aspect. That's the negative aspect of social media. But yeah, it's just crazy. It's, I have these discussions a lot with students, which we all know that, a lot of educational institutions kind of lean a certain way. But when I get in these discussions with some students, not all of them, but a majority of them are like, well, cops are bad. I don't want to be a patrol officer. Cops are out there, using excessive force all the time. And it's interesting because the numbers and the statistics don't reflect that. Do cops get into use of force? Yes, of course they get into use of force incidents, but it's not the picture. It's not the image that they have in their head. I mean, it's just a crazy world we live in right now. And Jim, you can attest to that, being a chief.
Yeah. And I think, again, it goes back to, podcasting as being a voice that's not, belonging to law enforcement as an institution or part of a media juggernaut, but you can sort of defeat some of those narratives, those false narratives. And I mean, I wish some learning institution would do a study of Chicago right now with 700 homicides. And when we talk about the disparate numbers and percentages of who gets shot by police in regards to their per capita population numbers, look at Chicago. Right. 6 to 10% African-American, but more than 40% of the 700 killed.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to look at that. And the Chicago Tribune does a good job with the mapping that shows, the economic and the lower education and things like that. But that's only part of it. And if the nation looked with scrutiny at a city of 2.5 million with 700 homicides, I mean, we should really study that and figure out what's wrong, and not just keep turning around and blaming law enforcement, because they're out there on the street every day, 24/7, wearing a uniform, and you won't hear anybody in an agency taking that on. They won't take that argument on about why violence is so high in the community.
And I think it goes beyond, and I agree with you, Jim, but I think it goes beyond law enforcement. As you know, it's a political issue that a lot of people won't touch. And it's interesting. It's indicative of the need for law enforcement in some of these communities. Like I said, it's very easy for certain people who want to defund the police or get rid of the police. And the same people, some of them have private security details. And the communities that really need law enforcement, like we talked about early on, are some of the biggest advocates of not defunding the police. I mean, my daughter lives in Chicago, and she sees the news all the time, the news cycle, where a lot of these communities are demanding more police.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't seem to hit the media, at least in certain outlets. It's the narrative that it's all the cops' fault. Mm-hmm. And it's just asinine to think that getting rid of cops and defunding the police is going to somehow cause, some sort of crime reduction. Look at New York City. They got rid of the 600-man undercover anti-crime unit in crime in New York City. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's up somewhere around 200%. So, I mean, it's just asinine, the mentality with some people.
One of the funniest. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say that, and the chief in Detroit is saying, don't tell us about defunding. We're going to keep as many cops
exactly
as we can here.
Good for him.
Yeah.
The funny thing that you said there, Pat, about the media and those stories, I saw some. I can't remember where I saw it. I wish I could track it down because I'd show it here. But essentially, they were flipping back and forth between clips, and it was clip one would be like some politician standing in front of City Hall or with like a really nice blouse on with all this really nice clothing, and be like, these communities do not want police in there, da 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 da. And then it'll flip to somebody in the community, be like, we want more police, like bring more police. Then it'll flip to the next politician and be like, they do not want any police. They want them out of their communities. Yeah. And then it flips back and they're like, we need more police in our communities. But it's so funny because, like you said, it's not being shown equally on both sides.
Well, look at Minneapolis. Minneapolis is where the George Floyd. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say, look at the picture in today's paper of the Portland mayor who try to go sidle up with all the protesters, and
Oh yeah,
they're throwing stuff at him and calling him names, and then he got tear gassed on top of it. Classic.
Well, look at Minneapolis too. I mean, where unfortunately George Floyd happened. The same city council that wanted, I think, and I forgive me, I haven't kept up with the story, but I think they were wanting to abolish the police. The same city council and the city administrator or mayor now are complaining because crime is rampant. Well, what do you think? There's a cause and effect. What do you think is going to happen if you get rid of the first line of defense? I mean, it's just, I don't understand. But people who are, people just, not all people, but some people are just buying this hook, line, and sinker. But it's probably not the people who live in Minneapolis or live in Detroit or live in Chicago. Or, I mean, it's just crazy.
And if we talk about Chicago, are you guys familiar with the statistics on the police suicide? Did you guys? I don't know if you guys
from 2020.
Well, I know from 2019 in Chicago, we had they were the second leading highest agency where officers were committing suicide, and we had multiple last year commit suicide in their police cruisers. So if we're just talking about an overall picture, I just think Chicago overall is having an issue.
No, I mean, and I think New York City, NYPD was up there too. Autumn, correct me if I'm wrong with suicides.
They're number one.
Yeah, it's number one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, that's why I go back to it. In my opinion, my humble opinion, I just think it's just, police suicides, unfortunately, have always been there. But I mean, it's just a crazy, unprecedented era that we live in right now. I do think I believe in what you said, Jason. It's cyclical. But God damn it, man, we can't sustain this.
When are we going to get over
environment?
This? When are we going to get over the hoop? And that's the thing. Is how high is this? When are we going to hit the peak? I don't even think we're at the peak yet. I think it depends on what happens in January on both sides, because law enforcement. People don't realize it takes a while to actually know your job, and then really it does. It doesn't just happen overnight. You can't. The problem with people is they don't realize you can't just fill a spot with anybody who has the critical knowledge you need to be an investigator, to be a sex crime investigator, to be a homicide investigator, to do anything. If you want to go after narco traffickers or anything, it takes time to build up that knowledge base. And if you shuffle people around, you're getting rid of specialized units, you're putting people back on patrol, people are leaving, people are transferring to other agencies that respect their abilities. It's going to be a hell of a power curve. The other thing, too, is post 9/11 in the Fed world, everybody and anybody had a hell of a budget to hire as many bodies as possible. Mm-hmm. That was in 2001. So in 2 years, how many of us are going to be able to retire? Me, I'm just waiting until I hit 50. But I already have my time in. But how many of those that had the knowledge base that started post 9/11 are going to start retiring?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
What's some positive stuff you got, Adam?
Positive stuff? I don't know. You want to give away some shit? Don't got a ton of people online. So these are the patches that, speaking of mental health, these are the patches that we had made for the ILET Summit. Awesome. The I Got Your Six. And it also, we had shirts made.
I guess I'm waiting for mine.
Yeah. Cool. You have a special care package coming. I'm sending out special Christmas packages to everybody. I'd be cautious while you're opening it.
Hey, we got a federal agent in here, dude. So we're covered. It's all on tape.
That's fine. Everything I do is on tape, right? Just like Jason was saying, just record yourself. But no, that's the mental health thing it's something that we still. It seems to me like we hit this peak of we were talking about it, and then elections happened, and now it's at the bottom of the news cycle again. And I think it's kind of inherent on us to keep that conversation going. I know all of you guys are doing it on your shows. I'm doing it on mine, and it almost seems like every second or third episode it's about mental health in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, like I think what we're going to do is we're going to be actually getting more of these made. The team at LA Police Gear is awesome. They've been fantastic supporting us and getting these things made. They make everything in-house. So we'll make some of these and we'll sell them off, and then all the proceeds will go to our friends over at Copline. And again, just to support officer mental health and crisis and stuff like that. So I think that's a positive. Is that something that we can help influence? For sure. Public service announcement for everybody. If you are thinking about going back into podcasting, if you're thinking about getting into podcasting, you're going to spend a lot of time looking at screens. And so definitely recommended that you pick up a pair of blue light blocking glasses. They're fantastic. They make you look smarter, even though you're not. And but they block. There you go. You can get prescription ones as well, but they block the blue light, so you don't get as much. I used to get headaches all the time when I'm sitting in front of a screen for eight hours. These things are a lifesaver. So
I'll be
if you want, go ahead.
I'll be picking them up for sure. I'm like rocking like a kind of borderline ocular migraine right now. So you guys have like squigglies. So I need some of those. Drop
the on your screen. Drop the blue. Turn it to like a night mode.
Oh, I just did that.
Oh yeah.
I just did. I went in and just got prescribed them. I took my old eyes in, and I didn't realize they could even prescribe blue light glasses, but they do. They work great. If I wasn't on the road right now, I'd probably have them with me.
And that's, speaking of things like that too, I mean, it's so important for sleep, right? We talked about having Dr. Stephen James on. I had the opportunity, another guy that I had on was Dr. Chuck Samuels out of Calgary. He works with Stephen James, and his program is the one that the RCMP use for their fatigue management up here in Canada. And they implement like these cool like nap rooms in the detachments and stuff like that, and have kind of broken through that barrier, which is nice. But sleep is so important. And one of the things that we talked about was for officers, you get home from your shift and sometimes you're still jacked up. So what do? You get on your phone, you go on your computer, you're watching your TV. But what you're doing is you're inundating and you're actually stopping the melatonin from being created, which will allow you to go to sleep and keep that sleep cycle. So it's such an important conversation, the science behind things, that I'd be happy to talk about that for another hour, because it is so out of the things that we can control, right? Like when we're talking about combat, right? We say like, hey, you can't control your heart rate, but you can control your breathing, which will help control your heart rate. Same idea, right? I can't control how much I sleep, but I can actively do things that will make my sleep better.
Yeah. And
you should be doing all of the above, because lack of sleep is one of the number one killers of our officers. So,
yeah.
You bring up a really good point. Are we going to talk about this? Can we talk about this?
Talk about whatever you want.
So this obviously this topic is something that I talk a lot about, and actually I just created a challenge for first responders. It's designed and it's backed by science. It's designed specifically for first responders. It's called the Culture Shock Challenge. And actually I designed it after I talked to several experts on my podcast, one being Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the other being Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, the author of Emotional Survival of Law Enforcement. Anyways, and so what I put together is these 6 like components of this challenge, but basically it's all around reducing stress. If we can reduce stress in our first responders, I think we're going to see a lot less issues, and we're going to see a lot less issues with the community. I mean, you guys know what happens when we're in a shit mood and we have to go and we're on patrol and we got to deal with calls and we got to deal with things. We're stressed out, we're burned out. All these things. It's not a really good, not a good situation, right? Not a good combination. So anyways, one thing that I want to talk about was sleep, and that I didn't realize, Dr. Kevin Gilmartin told me that there's actually, and it's like there's studies to back this, is that if you work out after shift for like just 15 to 20 minutes after shift, and the workout can be literally walking on a treadmill, that is going to decrease depression by 50%, and it's going to help you sleep. And so I said, okay, I don't believe you. And so I did it. And unbelievable results. It is cut because what it does is it burns that cortisol hormone, which is the fat storing hormone around our stomachs, and so it's doing all of this good stuff. You're decompressing from your day, like you said. Your mind you're hopefully you're not working out looking at a cell phone. you're actually doing something. And actually, I've put a lot of first responders through this, and I have them going through it now. They're losing weight, they're sleeping, they're happier, and they're like when they go to sleep, they're actually getting a good solid sleep. It's not, you guys know it, like how we toss and turn or like our phones will go off, but because they're doing this workout before bed, it's really making a difference.
Hey, real quick before, I know the others, you guys probably have something to say. I know, Jason, you got to take off, brother. So everybody here, where can they find you? Tell us about your podcast. Tell them about what you got going on right now.
Sure. The Protector Life is on all major podcast platforms. Really check out my YouTube channel. I'm trying to build that up a lot. It's YouTube / or whatever / The Protector Life. And I'll be talking about all sorts of good stuff. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just really, it's just fun stuff. But yeah, check it out. Or just Google Jason Piccolo. You'll run into me. And Monday night, I will be on Court TV again. So stop by there.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Are you the defendant or are you a defendant or what?
You ran into my
There's a knock
fence.
on the door. Hold on.
Is that like Judge Judy, or how does that work?
No, it's awesome. It's almost like, because Live PD got canceled. So now probably for the past 11 weeks, I've been going on for their, they would do a crime time segment on Court TV, and you can stream it online or on your cable or wherever. And we do live segments where we break down 4 incidents. So it could be a shooting incident. It could be a canine incident. It could be, we just had if you go to my YouTube, I did upload my clips where I do talk about law enforcement suicide and stress and stigma and stuff like that. So we get to talk about those things. But they use real live clips that happened like the week or two before, and we go through it. And it was me, and they'll have another expert on, and we'll talk. It's fun. And if anybody wants any more information about that, just shoot me an email. So, yeah.
Awesome, brother. And before I forget, remind me, you and I need to tee up next week to talk counter sex trafficking summit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we have Adam's episode will be coming out on the Protector Life this week.
Oh, that's exciting.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
okay, well, we're
gonna
gonna
editing.
There you go. Yeah, you need a lot of editing for me. I know. I'm brutal with this.
It was great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, brother.
Care.
See you later.
See you, brother. Take care, Jace.
Yeah, no, Jason was awesome. I got a chance to go on his show, and we were talking. We kind of came around to it because I didn't even realize how much he's into the counter sex trafficking world. And I brought up on his show that we're running this international summit on counter sex trafficking, and he's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's going to be a pretty massive event. We have Interpol involved now. We have all the major 3-letter agencies that have anything to do with human trafficking or sex trafficking in the U.S., Mexico, the Caribbean, South Africa, Australia, obviously, and then with Interpol, a lot of places in Europe. So it's going to be an awesome event, and it's basically going to be to take an officer that maybe doesn't know anything about sex trafficking. Maybe they're in an agency where they don't have the resources, right? Or maybe they're in an agency that just had a SVU unit shut down because of defunding. The idea being is from start to finish, from how does the investigation start? Is it a traffic stop? Is it a tip line, right? Is it something else? And then how does it go through the operation, the investigations, into prosecution, and then victim services? But touching on all the components, because a lot of the times we've been finding, and this isn't me, this is the experts that I talk to, they say they've been finding there's sometimes competition between the law enforcement side, which is catching the trafficker, and the victim services side. And sometimes those two things butt heads. So we have some AUSAs coming on that are going to talk about how to build out a case so you don't have to utilize as much of the victim testimony, and things like that. So it's going to be just an awesome event. Super excited for it. And that's coming up in March. So I'll link to that. But it's countersextrafficking.com. And my goal, and this is a lofty one, this is the biggest one. I remember when I told Pat about the ILET network, the ILET Summit, and I was like, he's like, how many people are you gonna have? I'm like, I want 10,000. He's like, that's a lot of people. So for this one, my target is 100,000 officers.
Awesome.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, because here's the best part about this whole thing, and sticking with my theme, it's going to be free for every law enforcement officer in the world.
I love that.
Nice. That's great.
So
cool.
It's day 1 is open to the public. Day 2 is restricted to law enforcement only. And that's because we're going to have a lot of actual operational conversations. We have some guys that are coming on that are active undercover that want to talk about stuff they're currently doing. And then it also allowed for some interagency collaboration and passage of information back and forth. So that's kind of coming up. That's the next coolest big thing. And so I'm going to get Jason involved. And anyway, I'm done promoting myself on my own show because I hate doing that. But
I love it.
I want to do that. It's great.
It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to what Autumn was saying about exercise and, how I think that's one thing. All of us know this, right? Like, all of us are active people, or in my case, at least I was formerly active before I turned into this couch potato, thanks to COVID. You feel better when you exercise. It was interesting though, because I want to go back to my conversation that I had with Chuck, Dr. Samuels, was that he said that when you're in the middle of a shift, we all know those people that in the middle of their shift, they'll go and they'll hit weights like they're 10 hours in and they're like, I got another 2 hours, 3 hours to go. They're going to hit weights real quick. And it's actually counterproductive. You think because it spools you up and it gets, you get that adrenaline rush. You're like, this will put me through, but you're fatigued, which is why you're tired. And now you're just adding on to the fatigue that your body's feeling. So there's actually a negative connotation to working out to try to stay awake, which was a very interesting portion of that conversation. But definitely afterwards, I see that we had the discussion of that as well, being a benefit. But trying to use it as a method of staying awake is an issue. And the question I asked him, I said, is it time to start having the conversation where an officer says, I'm gassed, or there's an issue, or a supervisor notices an officer is like falling asleep and they're like, I got to pull this person off the road before they kill themselves or kill somebody else. That's a hard conversation to have. Where do you guys think that starts?
Well, I know some departments are different, and Jim, I don't know if you've heard of this before, or any of you have heard of it before, but we actually have, my old department before I retired, actually made a sleep room or a couple sleep rooms in the police department where if you had that officer, while, again, providing coverage for the street, pulling that officer out and having he or she take a nap for 15, 20, 30 minutes to get recharged. So I know Boulder County Sheriff's Department here in Colorado. I know Boulder PD, other agencies. I'm not saying every agency has them, but again, that's kind of the trend now with the agencies, some of the agencies I just mentioned, where, they're going to like sleep centers inside the organization or inside the department to give officers a break. If officers have a quick turnaround, maybe they're doing court or some training, they can sleep at the the department. But we've done that before. A couple of years before I retired, we'd see, especially working graveyards, obviously people get tired, and that goes back into the great point that Autumn made about sleep. We need to take our sleep more seriously, but those sleep centers are becoming more and more popular, at least in my neck of the woods. And it gives officers a chance to come in, sleep for a little bit, recharge, get back on the street, and not be so gassed where they're falling asleep. And, we all know that, lack of sleep, it used to be a badge of honor. I remember when I was a young cop, you get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, Jim, and you guys probably know. I mean, it was, I got 5 hours of sleep, but it really is detrimental. It's bad enough working graveyards, and that's the nature of the job. But as you all know, motor skills, reaction times, and stuff like that, it's just not good. So even if you work on graveyards, you can still get plenty of sleep. You just got to make it a priority. You just have to make it a priority. I struggled with that for years on graveyards until I made it a priority. Okay, I am going to get 7, 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to black out the room. I'm going to have some music in the background, and you just have to make it a priority. But as far as what you said, Adam, people, getting gassed on duty and falling asleep, we've kind of tried to remedy that and mitigate that by coming up with solutions where they can get some sleep on duty. Not in their car, not in their patrol car, but come back to the police department. You know,
yeah, they call that micro napping or something
Yeah.
like that. But Dr. Stephen James, Adam, you know, he advocates taking naps during your shift, and you know, maybe it'll come to America. I'd love to see it. I used to have some of my best naps during our command staff meetings. Mondays at 3:00, man. Oh, brutal. But no, I mean, seriously, you know, even on Autumn's last show, I heard her guest talking about, you know, the 10-hour shift. Okay. But the 12-hour shift is just so brutal, and it's counterproductive, and your people are falling asleep, and they're just not thinking right. You're in this gray zone, and it doesn't benefit anyone. So I know the cops love it because it means an extra day off. But I think, you know, we seriously need to think, nobody wants to go back to 8-hour shifts because that's an extra day. But that's 52 days a year that you get another cop for a full shift, because usually those last couple hours are not very beneficial to anybody.
Yeah, 12-hour shifts. And you know, Jim, and you other two, Autumn and Adam, you probably know, those 12 hours are rarely 12 hours with an officer commute. And then you inevitably, Murphy's Law, you get that late call at the 11th hour. And then you're dealing with, you know, 12, 14, in some cases, 16-hour shifts. And I agree. I mean, some officers like, you know, the extra day, and it's hard from a resource allocation standpoint. We love 10 hours. That's what we're used to. But when we started experiencing some attrition, we had to go to 12 hours to maintain coverage on the street. And the overwhelming majority of cops didn't like it because it was just such a drain, because I can count on one hand how many times it was actually a 12-hour shift for an officer. It usually turned into a 14, 15, 16-hour. And then you tack on a commute, you know, it just makes for a very long day and a very dangerous day for the officer, you know. And
I think it's all on how we allocate those hours. So I started out with 2-2-3. It's a 12-hour schedule. You have every other weekend off. I'm sure you guys are familiar. And I mean, those were really long shifts. I worked 6P to 6A. And I'll tell you right now, by 3 a.m. every single morning, I was car to car with my partner, and I said, I'm taking a snooze because there's no way I'm going to make it through this.
Yeah, watch my back.
Exactly, because I couldn't. I mean, that's just the truth. And you're right. It was rarely ever just 12 hours. Definitely, you know, closer to 14. But at the same time, I just want to say, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on this, is, you know, my opinion is if we can allocate our officers, you know, at the 10-hour mark, they need to come off the road. They need to go to the department. Maybe there's things around the department that they can be doing, writing reports or what have you. Maybe at that point they can take their nap, whatever. I mean, and then I think then that's fine. I think we're doing progressive policing, and I think that's good. But I mean, 12 hours on the road, especially if you have a busy department and you're going call to call. They say, you know, if you guys know what it is exactly, I'd love to, you know, chime in. But Lieutenant Colonel Grossman was talking about sleep deprivation, and after 24 hours of no sleep, like you're like a 0.50, you're equivalent to like a 0.50 on the road.
0.08.
0.08. That's what I meant. 0.50, 0.05. Sorry. I had to be pretty shit-faced.
Or dead. Yeah, dead was probably more likely. Yeah,
pretty dead. No, but you know, the last 2 hours of the shift, then you're talking about overlap, and I could see problems with that too, because the next shift's not on yet. So maybe in the middle of shift. And in Redwood City, near California, near where I live, the police chief was actually checking into Cal Fire for their big sleeping bunkhouses, and borrowing one of those or putting one on site so that cops could use it. I mean, you know, with $1 million being the median house price in San Francisco, you got to drive at least 45 minutes out of the place, out of the area to get to affordable housing. So you don't want a cop 12, 14 hours and then doing an hour commute. No, that's no good.
Yeah, it's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, and you can get creative in some instances. Maybe have a floater car or a car that, is covering those late calls that are coming in. You got to get creative with this stuff. And that's what we did in my agency. You want to keep overtime. You want to manage your overtime budgets. I mean, that's always a problem in a lot of organizations. But, I mean, I always used to tell, the officers, if shifts are coming in early, we don't have a floater car, to cover those late calls that are coming in when officers should be getting into the PD to do their calls. And if shifts are coming in early, my expectation, if the cops are getting inundated with calls, is you get in service and start shagging those calls from the officers that need to come back into the PD and start working on the reports. That's my expectation. I'll pay the overtime, but it's a matter of communicating and, expectations and, I mean, just coming up with creative ways to kind of mitigate, those 12 hours days to becoming 14, 16-hour days. And there's ways to do it. You just got to get creative, and you got to be on the same page with your patrol supervisors, and you got to, it has to be an open communication kind of thing. You can't just expect the patrol officers that are working 12 hours to keep shagging those calls at the 11th hour. They're just going to get burned out. I mean, and that's going to cause, other issues, turnover issues. And, we had that problem until we started coming up, with creative issues or creative ways to kind of mitigate it.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen staggered start shifts where they're overlapped. So you'll have like 6, 7, 8, whatever it is. And then that way there's always some overlap. But one thing, what Jim was saying about fire, I can't remember if it came up in a conversation or where it was, but somebody was saying like how their city, somebody made a comment, I don't know if it was a civilian or not, that said, well, we're paying your salary, so you shouldn't be sleeping. And I'm like, time out. Who do you think pays fire salary? And they sleep. You know what I mean? It's funny, but it's funny. It's like, would you rather have an officer that's 100% to respond to calls, or would you rather have somebody who's completely sleep deprived and fatigued, and they're the one that's showing up when you're in a domestic with your husband who's totally juiced? Like, what's your alternative, right? I mean, it's funny because people just don't think of everybody lives in their own little bubble, and it's like, well, it's not applicable to me, so I'm going to make my opinion known to everybody. Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody.
Right.
I think it's a matter of re-educating, it's educating the public too. When we first started coming out with the idea of having sleep centers in the PD, people are like, what the hell? We don't pay you to sleep. But I think when you have experts that come on and start talking about, like Jim, you mentioned the guest that came on or whoever was talking about the benefits of sleeping on duty. It's the way you craft the message. No, we're not we're sleeping for 12 hours. But officers are taking intermittent breaks when they're exhausted to recharge. So I think it's all in how you craft the message and the marketing behind it. And then you're going to get the buy-in from the public, at least, depending on how you message it. Okay, well, these cops maybe do need to get recharged. And because I think when people hear about sleeping on duty, well, who's protecting the city? Well, it's not. We're still going to maintain coverage for the city, but we might pull an officer off who needs some sleep to recharge to provide that service that you're expecting for the community. Yeah. I think a lot of it is the messaging, the marketing behind it, and getting that buy-in from the community.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, that's Stephen James, and he's near you, Pat. He's Aspen.
I'm gonna have to see if he wants.
I'll send you his information.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's such a great. It's such and sleep is such a great topic. And I'm glad we're talking about it because that, again, I grew up in an environment or just, as a young officer where you sleep when you're dead. You're not, who cares if you're tired or exhausted? You keep going.
Right.
And, I cherish my sleep now. I mean, I just do. I mean, I love my sleep. And again, that's something that I kind of deprive myself throughout my years in law enforcement. And like we were talking about, everything suffers, your fitness, your relationships with your family. I don't care if you're on graves, you can still maintain a healthy sleep pattern in a cycle.
Well, and I think too, like we also in law enforcement put ourselves last. And all first responders, this is not just police, this is all first responders. I think we put ourselves last. And so you're right, like people still do wear that badge of no sleep and with honor. And I think that's the culture. And that's why we need to change it, right? Like, because it's not effective. It is not effective. Look at where we are at today. We can look at the relationships between us and the community, look at our suicide epidemic, Let's look at how healthy are our officers? Not very, all the way around. And so I think that just comes to us being, the culture being, we are last. But you know what? We can't pour from an empty cup, right?
No. I mean, there's a great book by James Altucher who the title is Choose Yourself. And the whole premise is you need to take care of yourself first. We all have heard the overused analogy of getting on an airplane and the oxygen masks, drop, and who are you going to put it on? You're going to put it on you first. Absolutely. And I agree with you 100% on them. We're really good at solving other people's problems and taking care of other people, but we're not very good at taking care of ourselves. And in order for us to thrive in this profession and to live a long life and to have good relationships, we have to take care of ourselves. I mean, that has to be the priority. And no, it's not narcissistic. You can still take care of the city and community, but you have to take care of yourself.
100%. 100%.
Here.
Look at Adam, intently working.
I'm intensely thinking. I'm sitting here, like, it's funny. I'm sitting here. The one thing that always happens is during podcasts, right? Somebody will come up, and this is something I got to get better at, but it's like somebody will reference a book, right? And then you're like, great book. We're going to put that in the show notes. And then it's like, totally forget to follow up with them on it. And then I never put it in the show notes. And then I'm always wondering if I'm going to get that email from somebody being like, hey, you said you were going to give us this book in the show notes. I never did. But it happens all the time. Dave Grossman is a fantastic. When he was on my podcast, that's what he talked about, was sleep. We talked about sleep. Steve James, also fun fact, former British military. So Pat, just for an FYI.
Okay.
So
shoot him my way.
I sent you his contact there in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, super interesting points of view for sure. And I mean, here's the thing with those guys, there's a handful of them that are kind of at the top of the mountain, and they all work together, which is amazing because they're all drawing from different experiences and different, they're dealing with different groups of people, but the knowledge, they're collaborating and they're bringing it all together to make it kind of, here's the best solution that we can make for you. Which is kind of what I'm a big proponent of in doing this, right? Like the four of us are sitting here. Obviously, we had Jason on. There's a whole bunch of people we reached out to that did podcasts, and we're gonna have to queue this up again, and we'll get a whole bunch more of the podcasters on. And but it's just collaborations. It's just sharing ideas. And if you don't share ideas, how can they ever grow and evolve, right? Okay. I think that's one of the coolest things that we do as a profession is just collaborating. And then, somebody will be listening to this, they're going to hear one thing and they're going to take it and run with it. And, somebody may listen to this and it may spur a whole new career for somebody because they find it super interesting, or they may end up finding a solution to one of the issues we brought up today. I just think that's the coolest thing. You never know where your voice is going to carry.
Hey, Adam, I'd like to ask if you or any of the others have had experience with professional bookers, these agents that are pushing speakers to get on the show.
I love it.
I have had it. You mean I've had experience by I've had them email me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually the email goes something like, I appreciate you reaching out. Go pound sand. Something to that effect, not maybe specifically in those words. I'm very right now. Actually, one of my team members is awesome. She's reaching out to people, and just people that I gave her basically a list of people, and I said, can you please reach out to these people for me? I'd love to get on their show. I know Pat's the same way. Like, I'm very cognizant of anybody who I have on my show. I am so picky to the point where, I feel bad because I don't want anybody to say no to me to coming on their show, even though I've said no to people coming on mine.
Right.
But it's because when I think of my audience, every time I'm doing my show, and I'm like, even though I'd love to have a conversation with that person, it doesn't make sense for what my direct audience is. Right. If I want to have that conversation, I'll come on your show and have that conversation. If you want to talk politics, if you want to talk whatever, go nuts. I was on Police Off the Cuff with those boys, and I jumped on that thing, and from start to finish was just a complete gong show. Like, it was a complete goat rope the entire time, but it was a blast. And we didn't talk about anything coherent for like an hour, and that was a ton of fun. But I know if we did that on my show, it wouldn't work, right? And so I think when people try to push bookings on you, it's kind of like they never quite hit the mark, right? And it's, I have a list of people. I probably have a list of 100 people that I'm still actively targeting to get on the show. So until I exhaust, and once I exhaust that, even like, I'd rather have one of you three on again and promote your stuff than have somebody new on. And that's
a ringing endorsement. If you don't get the 100, you'll take one of us three.
No. That's not what I meant.
Plan
what
B.
I meant.
Which one of us is 101?
Obviously,
probably Pat.
We'll flip a coin. A 3-sided coin. That's not what I meant. My point is that, again, I think that we talked about collaboration. I think there's so much power in that rather than have somebody on, I'd rather talk with somebody that we've already been working together. I would rather, I have sponsors that started off like from like month 1 of the podcast that I reached out to on a limb, and I said, hey, I'm doing this. And they're like, I want to support you. Right. And I'm going to prioritize them over everybody from here on out. I don't care if somebody comes along and offers me $1 million. If they want to discredit the other sponsor, I'm going to tell them no. Like, I don't know if I'm just built like that, but there's value to me in loyalty. And I'm never going to throw that away just to get a big name on my show. It's not worth it to me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I get, people that want to come on the show, and I'm like we're all probably very picky in who we want to come on the show, but they have to provide value to come on the show. Value not for me, obviously, but value to the listener. And I get people who come on or send me an email. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about before, where you have to develop that relationship first and cultivate that relationship to a degree before you start just sending blind emails for, to want to come on a show. And I routinely say no. I mean, it's not going to help my listeners. It's not going to provide value to my listeners. I don't think it's going to resonate. And that just comes with more experience doing podcasting, which we're all very experienced at it. I'm just like you, Adam. I'm just not going to let anybody on my show that take that as snobby or uppity, but I'm just not going to let anybody just come on my show. They have to provide value and they have to fit with the show. So I'm very comfortable with, no matter who they are, with turning down people who want to come on the show, and I don't have a problem with it. And that's the thing, the more you start doing it, we were talking about, some takeaways of starting a podcast. You still, even at the beginning, you still have to be kind of selective with who you want to come on the show or on your show, at least in my opinion, because that's going to set the tone of what kind of show you have. You know what I mean?
That may or maybe not why I talk for 30 minutes to myself.
She's like, no one's good enough for me. No one's good enough for my show. And when I bring people on, they show up late. That's what she's thinking.
But for all the people out there, like we were talking about, to kind of round it out, I mean, for the people out there that want to start a show, do it. That goes back into what we were talking about before. I mean, just, have a niche or have an area that you want to kind of focus on, and just go for it, man. I think we're so worried sometimes about what people are going to think, and, they're going to criticize us and they're going to give us a bad review. Who gives a shit? Just do it and go out there and let the market determine whether or not your show is going to be successful or not. But just do it.
Yeah. Good advice.
What's your experience, Jim?
Well, I've had a couple people like hounding me on other social media outlets asking to be on the show. This story needs to be told, and I'm not quite sure how to just say no. Nobody wants to hear that story. Nobody really does want to hear your story.
Yeah.
I think the straightforward answers, the straightforward approach is always the best. It seems to hurt the least amount, right? Like Pat was saying, when people have said no to, I've had very, very few people say no to coming on the show. And usually there was a reason, like I'm operational right now, like I can't, right? And it's just like, I'm like, cool, I'll talk to you in 10 years when you're out. But when they do say no, it's like, cool, hey, no problem. And I think that's a mindset thing too, is and sort of kind of go away from what you were talking about there, Jim, but when we're reaching out to people and you're starting something new, you got to get into that mindset where it's just like, understand that a lot of people are going to basically tell you off, or it's not going to work at the very beginning. Pat was saying LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. Yeah, I think I'm over like 15,000 followers now or whatever it is. But it's such a fantastic network because when you're trying to reach out to people, you can literally type in like, I want law enforcement chiefs in the eastern part of the United States that have all gone to this one university that all like chocolate or whatever. Obviously I'm being facetious, but you can narrow it down so tightly that you can reach out to people. You can find CEOs of companies. And usually what I do is I'll literally find whoever's at the top of the totem pole. And this kind of goes against my military intuition, which is like, don't jump the chain of command. But I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to the top. And it's like, I always go top down with people, and I'll talk to the CEO. And if they're like, yeah, I want in, then they'll direct me to the person who's going to facilitate it. If it's an agency, I spoke with I was assistant deputy director of the ATF last week. And because I literally just reached out to him on LinkedIn. I mean, obviously he obviously did some type of background check on me before he took my phone call, but again, I said, this is what we're putting together. We're putting together, it was actually about ILET Summit 2021. And I said, I'd like you to, come and be involved. And he's like, we would love to be involved. And we're going to tell us what instructors you want from ATF and we'll come and support it.
That's amazing.
And it's just about the approach that you take with people, not being afraid to go and just say, hey man, here's what I'm doing. And like Pat said at the beginning, you have to deliver value.
Yes.
And I wanted to bring this up and I totally forgot, but I'm glad I circled back around to it. Delivering value doesn't mean that you have to do things for people. I mean, a lot of people think it is like, I have to, promote your stuff and share and like and comment and all that stuff. Sharing or providing value is something as simple as saying, here's my mission. My mission is to get free training to officers that need it. So, and get the best experts in the world to do it. And if you can help me facilitate that, then I'd love for you to be involved. And usually those people that say yes are the people that have the same mindset that I do, that love teaching, they love educating, they're trainers, they want to share information that's going to help somebody. And that's the person I want involved with me anyways. And those are the people that always say yes. And it doesn't matter if they are not in law enforcement, if they're junior, if they're a trainer, or if they're at a senior level. It doesn't matter where they're at, because you could be a chief, but your passion is still teaching. And so those are the people that I always try to associate myself with. And you kind of find them, like you find each other, and which is the coolest thing about it. And LinkedIn's a fantastic place to do it. Anyway, I want to cycle back on that because you brought that up, and I think that's super important.
Well, that's what we were talking about before. They're literally, I mean, I'm sure they're gatekeepers, but not like there were 15, 20 years ago. That's the beauty of where we're living in now. I can literally reach out to somebody that I want on my show who's maybe a big name, and literally through social media, I'm going to find out how to contact them 9 times out of 10, and then just reach out to them and say, hey, I would love what you're doing. You provide some great value. That's the beautiful thing about the world we live in right now, where everybody, if you're on social media, you're accessible and you can come on to one of our shows and just provide value back. So that's the beauty with the age we're living in with technology. I I can't harp that enough. And people always ask me, well, how'd you get that person on? I asked. I just asked him or her if they wanted to come on.
And that's the craziest conversation. Yeah. Every time. How'd you get
people somebody had magic or something. Like I had to go to New York City and get an interview or something. And I just asked him on social media.
The funniest one, it sucks that Jay couldn't make it tonight. We all love Jay, but he introduced me to Christian Gudegast, who is the director for Den of Thieves. And so Jay was a consultant on Den of Thieves. And so he just happened to bring it up in conversation. I think I think we were on a call before or after the interview. And we were talking about it, and he basically said, yeah, he's like, this guy. And I was like, do you think you'd be interested in doing a podcast? And he's like, probably. He's like, here's his information. Did a put me in contact with him. And that was one episode that we did that was kind of outside the box, where I talked to a Hollywood director about making a movie that actually was fairly close to real life when it comes to tactics for law enforcement and military. As far as it was, what we talked more about, like simulating actual firearms and stuff like that in Hollywood, but they did such a fantastic job on it that I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. And it was an aside from what we normally do, which is training, but it was still in the realm of context of, I'm assuming if there's a law enforcement officer who listens to all the training stuff, they'll be interested in listening to a Hollywood director talk about a super rad movie, talking about how they actually do all the shooting and explosions and things like that in Hollywood. So it's kind of just crazy how these connections happen. And don't be afraid to ask people, right? I mean, but also don't get in touch with somebody just to be a bridge to somebody else.
Right.
That's a piss off. Somebody reaches out to you and they're like, lost Pat for a second. There you go. They reach out to you and I had somebody get a hold of me and they're like, hey man, it's great to meet you. I'd love to collaborate with you. Cool. And it was like the next thing they sent me was, hey, could you introduce me to so-and-so? And I'm like, oh, no, no, man, I don't even know you. Like, you know what I mean? But you got to avoid doing that kind of thing, because that's kind of underhanded.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that. That's a really good piece of advice. People, I think sometimes, like, in this realm, people forget, like, we're all humans. Who the hell wants to go, like, you're at a party. It's like you're at a party. Like, you're at a party and, like, I don't like walk up to Pat, who I don't know, and I'm like, hey Pat, my name is Autumn. Hey, can you introduce me to Jim real quick? Like, you don't do that, you know?
Well, people do that, you know, and it's just like, that's such a big turnoff is, yeah, people just like, I don't know, they think that that's okay. And I get that a lot. I'm sure each one of you do, where it's like, I mean, that, and then what you've done is you've already set the stage. It's that, like, they all say about first impressions. What that first impression means everything. And then it's almost like that, you know, you have that bad taste in your mouth. Like, okay, I know you, I'm going to avoid you like the plague. I mean, you just want to be introduced to somebody else because of my contacts. So like I said, it's all about value and providing value and bringing something to the table instead of just wanting to get, you know, connected with somebody you can't get connected with. So yeah, it's crazy.
How do you feel that with Jim? Because I mean, like, Police One, that's a huge platform. So you must get that all the time.
There it is next to my name.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, sometimes I'll get directed by my editor saying, hey, do you want to talk to this person? And sometimes I have to, like, take it from a different angle to figure out what it is I want to get out of them, as opposed to what they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that keeps after me was about corruption at some level of law enforcement. I thought, you know, that now I don't really want to talk about that right now. I'm not.
Does that person happen to have a book?
Yeah.
And does that person former out in California?
Text me.
Yeah, I got trapped.
You got trapped, like, as far as it was an ambush or something, or what?
That is a rookie move.
Rookie move.
I'll tell you guys about it.
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, I got Rick Smith from Axon recently, and I just, you know, I wanted to talk about, you know, this predicament with use of force and how, you know, if they're taking away the carotid and some agencies have said no taser, you know, where do we go from here? And he was awesome. And I just reached out to him, and he had somebody contact me, but eventually he was the guy I talked to. And he said, hey, by 2029, I am going to make the bullet obsolete. I love that. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very cool. And he, I didn't know this, but he's a scientist, right? He developed this from the scientific theory after a friend who was shot on the street. And the way he explained the use of the electronic weapon was better than any I've heard in the last, 15 years.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. I mean, sometimes, you get an interview that you're thinking, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And then they just, blow your doors off.
I will say, so that's like one thing with me is like when I get somebody on my podcast, I always need to go someplace that they don't typically go, right? Because you get like people like us who we frequent podcasts, right? Well, everybody knows all that shit about you. Like I know what you typically talk about. I don't care. I had a gentleman on who, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about him. And he always shows this like asshole, blunt, like just in your face kind of guy. And I had him on my podcast and I've got a lot of people like, wow, I've never seen that side of this guy. Like that was awesome. And like, I just really pulled that out of him. And to me, I think that's like an art all in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's like my goal with the podcast is always to get and pull something out of somebody that we might not know.
Love it.
My phone died.
You got to plug
I
it
am having an issue with technology today.
Oh,
my goodness. Man, I tell you, if something could have gone wrong today, it did. It did.
But we flowed with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, you guys are a bunch of professionals, so I would expect as much.
Oh, that's good. Thinking highly of us. Oh, he doesn't think that highly of us because we're 101 and 102 and 103. So.
I'm 103, Autumn.
You guys,
you're one of the other.
You guys really take things literally. Well, no, what we should do is I know I've had Pat on enough. I don't need to have him on anymore. Jim and Autumn, I need to have you guys on for sure with what we have coming up on down the pipe here. So you let me know what works for you and we'll make it happen.
Well, why don't you let us know? Because Adam, we know you and your scheduling. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. That is true.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'd love to have all three of you on. Pat, I'm way overdue.
Oh, to come back on my show, my friend?
Yeah. No, to have you on.
Yeah, I would love to come on. You just let me know and
quid.
I'll be happy to come on.
Oh, looks like Autumn's phone also died. That's fantastic. That's what happens when you do these things for like 3 hours.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, I know. I know. Here's the funny thing. I've done these every month. We've done them for these shows, for the events. It's like the best. I find that this is the best format to have discussions.
Oh yeah.
It's the most fun. It's the most dynamic, and people don't usually get to see a lot of it, and it goes so fast. I mean, especially having all of us doing this for a living. It really 3 hours is nothing. But we have four instructors on here. It's 4 people that literally talk for a living. So it's like we never don't have something to talk about, right? Which is why this is so much fun all the time. We're gonna have to do this again with more people. I'd love to do this with like 10 people. So there's a lot of the problem. I was gonna have some people from the UK on and Australia, but it's difficult to do something live with those guys because the time zones are so bad.
Yeah,
it is tough. Yeah, they're like in bed.
Yeah, well, it's 7 hours usually for the UK and then 15 hours for Australia ahead.
Dang. That's crazy.
Big difference.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's morning in Australia. We could probably get somebody in Australia right now if we wanted to.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Adam, when you said it was going to be 3 hours, I thought, no way. Who's talking for 3 hours? Well, I guess we did.
Oh, we did.
This is, you know what? I can't remember, we were doing one. I can't remember what we did it for, but we did 3 hours, and I cut it off. We ended the broadcast at 3 hours, and then we kept talking, and I think the entire recording was like 5.5.
Oh, fuck.
and it's just like, but you don't. What happens though is you're sitting there and you're talking about stuff you're passionate about, and so it's very easy to just lose track of time when you're having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, good group.
Right?
Really, really smart people,
Good.
Adam. Good job.
It was fun.
Here or in general?
Here are the people you had today. Besides, I didn't.
Yeah, it was awesome.
You missed my quote when I quoted Autumn when she said, "If you are the smartest person in the room, get the F out." And I told her, "Well, that means I'm staying."
I'm staying too.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time and doing this with me. This is a ton of fun. We should definitely rehash this again. Set this up as something where we can all jump on and have these conversations and lighten each other's loads a little bit, so to speak, and just talk shop. And
Absolutely.
It's kind of cathartic, right? I mean, I'm involved with a lot of veteran support groups and stuff like that, where we have like Zoom calls, and it's like having a meeting, but you're on Zoom, right? And you get to sit and talk and vent. And sometimes people just sit there and don't say anything the whole time. They just want to listen. And sometimes people don't shut up. They just talk the whole time. So it's I think these are great. And then also people get to see what other, like, who else is working in this space.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I love, and now that I'm involved now, Autumn and I and Jim and I, hopefully real soon in the future, we'll get some collabs going. But I know anytime Pat puts something out, I'm the first one to jump on and share it with the world, because like I love the stuff that you guys are doing, right? And so for me, it's easy. It's not like I'm working like, oh, I got to do social media posts. I'm like, fuck yeah, here's something new. I'm going to share it out to a bunch of people because I find it interesting. And going back to our beginning part of the conversation, I think if you do this for the right reason, which is that you're passionate about it, it's kind of, you can't lose at it, right? I didn't start this to make money. I started this because I like talking to people that are like-minded. And it's a win for me every day I get to come to work, which is, I mean, walk downstairs. Half the time I'm actually not wearing pants. People don't know that.
They know it now.
Come on over and check it out for yourself. So this is a ton of fun, guys. I honestly honored that you guys would join me on this, and love it. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I got to hop off, but it was a pleasure, brother. And I agree with you. I agree with Jim. I was like 3 hours, but it went by so quickly because I'm just honored to be, invited. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. I really do. Anytime you want me to come back on, I'd be happy to do it.
Same here. Great company.
Absolutely.
Before we go, let's go around the horn and let people know what you're doing and where they can find you.
You can come find me. The lights will be on. You can find me, Autumn Clifford, at Officer Autumn on Instagram. That's really where I'm most active. And you can come and hang out on my podcast at Changing the Culture. Find it any place you can listen to podcasts. And we're on Audible now. That's an exciting thing. If you are and not on Audible, you need to get there.
Awesome.
Love it. Jim?
Hey, I am on police1.com, Policing Matters, on all the podcast locations. We do the Friday release. This week we released one on Tuesday, but my shows are generally 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and I try not to do all the talking. I come up with a couple of ideas, talk with the guest beforehand, and it's mostly about policing, but a lot of well-being, health, sleep, mental health, all those good things. So I really want to support our law enforcement people out there, public safety people. You do have supporters out there, and I'm one of them. So give a listen.
Awesome. Love it. Pat?
Cool. Everybody can find all my handles and all my social stuff at cjevolution.com. And again, thank you all for listening to this great roundtable with these amazing guests. I really appreciate it. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, best place to find everything related to me and the podcast is at cjevolution.com.
Woo!
I love it. If I could ask all you to hang around for 2 seconds, we'll do a quick AAR when we cut this off. But for everybody here who joined us, thank you so much. It's an honor, and thank you to the guests for putting up with me not showing up for the first 10 minutes and actually writing it on their own. That was a first, and I knew you guys could handle it. You're all professionals, so thank you so much for that. If you're, again, watching this and you want to find more about what we're doing, everything has been consolidated at eyelet.network. So everything's now under the Eyelet Network brand. We'll have the podcast, the events, the training, everything that you want is all there. So you can find it at ilet.network. So thank you so much for joining us here.